Chapter 1. The blizzard tore through the forest like a living thing, hungry and vicious, ripping at her clothes, her skin, her sanity. She ran because stopping meant dying, and even now, broken, bleeding, cast out like trash, some stubborn part of her refused to surrender to the cold or the wolves tracking her scent through the white hell she'd stumbled into. Her breath came in ragged gasps that burned her lungs, each inhale like swallowing glass. The snow beneath her bare feet had gone from painful to numb an hour ago, maybe 2. Time had lost meaning somewhere between the rejection and the running, between the moment her alpha had looked at her with those ice-chip eyes and said the words that shattered her world, and this moment, where death stalked her through a storm that seemed to know exactly how much she could take before breaking completely. The wound in her side screamed with every footfall. His claws had gone deep when she'd tried to fight the exile, tried to make him see reason, tried to beg for mercy. She should have known he'd never give. The blood had soaked through her shirt hours ago, freezing against her skin in a grotesque second layer that cracked when she moved. She could feel it, the wrongness of the injury, the way it refused to heal the way shifter wounds should. He'd made sure of that, made sure she'd suffer. Her wolf should have surfaced by now, should have taken over, pushed through the pain and the fear and the soul-deep exhaustion. But every time she reached for that primal part of herself, that wild creature that lived beneath her skin, it flickered like a candle in wind, there one moment, gone the next, as if the rejection had severed something vital, cut the thread that bound woman to beast. She stumbled over a hidden root, went down hard on her knees. The impact sent fresh agony lancing through her side, and she bit down on her lip until she tasted copper to keep from screaming. Screaming would bring them faster. The hunters, her former pack. The wolves who'd once called her sister now baying for her blood because their alpha had commanded it. The alpha who'd promised her forever. The alpha who'd shredded that promise like it meant nothing. She forced herself back to her feet, swaying, the world tilting dangerously. The trees around her had become hostile strangers, their bare branches reaching like skeletal fingers against a sky gone white with snow. The storm swallowed every landmark, every familiar marker. She'd been running blind for miles, guided only by instinct and desperation, and even those were failing now. How did it come to this? The question circled her mind like a vulture, waiting for her to fall so it could pick her bones clean. She'd done everything right, been loyal, been strong, been exactly what the pack needed, and still, he'd looked at her like she was garbage, like she was weak, like she was nothing. "You were supposed to be my mate," she whispered to the storm, to the ghost of him that haunted every step. "You marked me. You claimed me in front of everyone." The wind howled back, mocking. Her wolf stirred, a flicker of heat in her chest, but when she tried to grasp it, tried to pull it forward, pain exploded behind her eyes, white hot and blinding. She gasped, stumbled, caught herself against a tree trunk. The bark bit into her palm, rough and real, anchoring her to consciousness when everything in her wanted to slip away into the dark. Something was wrong with her wolf. Something beyond the rejection, beyond the trauma of being cast out. She could feel it, a strangeness in the way her power moved, sluggish and erratic, like blood trying to flow through damaged veins. Every time she reached for it, every time she tried to shift, it felt like touching a live wire. Dangerous, unpredictable. A howl cut through the storm, closer than before. Her heart kicked against her ribs. They were gaining on her. Of course they were. She was leaving a blood trail a blind wolf could follow, and she'd lost too much, run too far, hurt too deeply to outpace healthy hunters. She pushed off the tree, forced her legs to move, one foot in front of the other. Again, the mantra that had kept her alive this long. Don't stop, don't think, don't feel, just survive. But survival for what? The question whispered through her mind, insidious and true. She had no pack, no home, no mate. The rejection had severed every bond, every connection. In the shifter world, a lone wolf was a dead wolf. Cast out meant hunted. Exiled meant executed. Eventually, when the isolation and the grief drove you mad enough to become a threat, he'd sentenced her to death, just took his time about it. Another howl, and this time she heard the others answer, a chorus of voices she knew as well as her own, knew their scents, their personalities, the sound of their laughter around the pack fire. They'd eaten together, trained together, bled together. Now they'd kill her together. Her vision blurred and she realized she was crying, tears freezing on her cheeks before they could fall. Stupid. Weakness. She swiped at them with the back of her hand, the gesture clumsy, her fingers too numb to feel her own face. The ground beneath her feet started to slope downward, treacherous with hidden ice. She tried to slow, to control her descent, but her legs gave out. She went down in a tumble of limbs and snow and pain, rolling until an outcropping of rocks stopped her with brutal finality. She lay there, staring up at the white sky, breath coming in shallow pants. Everything hurt. Everything. Body, heart, soul. The kind of pain that made you wonder why you were fighting so hard to keep breathing. I accept your rejection, Alpha. The words fell from her lips, barely audible over the wind. She'd said them before, back in the pack house, when he'd demanded her acknowledgement, demanded she submit to his decree. But they'd caught in her throat then, choked by pride and hurt and disbelief. Now they came easier. Now they felt like the truth. Because what was the point of fighting anymore? The silver heat started the moment the words left her mouth. It began in her chest, a warmth that shouldn't exist in the middle of a blizzard, and spread through her veins like liquid fire. She gasped, tried to move, but her body had stopped obeying. The heat intensified, building, burning, until she was sure she was dying. This was it. This was how it ended, not torn apart by her former pack, but consumed from the inside by whatever broken thing her wolf had become. The snow around her started to melt. She could hear it. The hiss of ice meeting heat, could see the steam rising from her skin. The silver light came next, pouring from her pores, from her eyes, from the wound in her side. Bright enough to hurt, strange enough to terrify her. This wasn't normal. This wasn't shifter magic. This was something else, something other. The wolves burst from the tree line as the light reached its peak, 6 of them. Massive and gray, eyes gleaming gold in the storm. They circled her, hackles raised, lips pulled back to show teeth meant for ripping, for killing. She recognized them all. Marcus, her alpha's second. Elena, who'd taught her to hunt. Devon, who'd made her laugh when the training got too brutal. They'd been her family, her friends. Now they looked at her like she was a monster. The silver light pulsed, brighter, hotter, and the wolves backed up a step. Uncertain, afraid. She could smell their fear cutting through the snow and the blood and the ozone scent of whatever power was eating her alive. Marcus shifted first, taking his human form despite the cold. Tall and scarred, naked but seemingly unbothered by the storm. "What are you?" His voice carried the weight of command, the authority of someone used to being obeyed. She tried to answer, tried to tell him she didn't know, that she was as terrified as he looked, but the words wouldn't come. The silver heat had reached her throat, burning away language, burning away everything except the raw, primal need to survive. "She's gone rabid," Elena said, still in wolf form, the words echoing in that strange way-shifter communication worked. "We need to end this before—" The ground beneath them cracked, not a small crack, not a fracture. A massive split in the earth that radiated out from where she lay, spider webbing across the frozen ground with sounds like gunshots. The wolves scattered, yelping as the world beneath their paws became unstable. She felt herself falling before she understood what was happening. The earth opened up beneath her, swallowing her whole, and the last thing she saw before darkness took her was Marcus reaching out, his face twisted in horror, his mouth forming words she couldn't hear over the roar of collapsing snow and stone. Then nothing, just the cold, just the dark, just the silver fire burning in her veins like a star trying to be born in the worst possible place. Consciousness returned in pieces, fractured and confusing. First, the absence of cold. Her entire body had been frozen for so long that the lack of it felt wrong, disorienting, like waking up in someone else's skin. Second, the smell. Earth and minerals and something ancient, like the inside of a tomb that hadn't been opened in centuries. No wind, no storm. The air sat heavy and still, pressing against her from all sides. Third, the pain, or rather, the lack of it. The wound in her side had stopped screaming. Her feet no longer felt like blocks of ice attached to her legs. Everything should hurt, should be agony after that fall, but instead she felt hollow, empty, like something had been scooped out of her and she was only now noticing the absence. She opened her eyes to darkness absolute. Panic flared, immediate and visceral. She tried to move, to scramble to her feet, but her body was having none of it. Everything was too heavy, too slow, like moving through water. Easy. The voice came from her left, male and low and completely unfamiliar. You've been out for 3 days. Your body needs time. 3 days? She turned her head toward the voice, saw nothing but shadows within shadows. Who? Her throat was desert dry, the word coming out as barely more than a rasp. Here. Something pressed against her lips, a water skin. She drank without thinking, too thirsty to care about poison or drugs or any of the 1,000 dangers her mother had warned her about. The water was cold and clean and tasted like minerals. When she'd had her fill, she pushed the skin away and tried again. Who are you? Where am I? Questions with complicated answers. She heard movement, cloth rustling, footsteps on stone. The short version, you fell into a place that shouldn't exist, and I found you before you died. The longer version requires you to be strong enough to handle it. I can handle it. The words came out sharper than intended, edged with all the fear and confusion she was trying to suppress. A pause. Then, can you? You're a long way from your pack, little wolf. A long way from everything you knew. And based on the state I found you in, blood, hypothermia, rejection sickness, eating you alive, I'd say handling things isn't your strong suit right now. The words stung because they were true. She wanted to argue, to defend herself, but what defense was there? She'd been cast out, hunted by her own people, and had apparently fallen into some underground cavern where a stranger with an unsettlingly calm voice was nursing her back to health for reasons she couldn't begin to guess. The rejection. She swallowed, hating the shake in her voice. You know what that means? You're a shifter? I know what it means. His tone carried an edge now, something dark and old. And no, I'm not a shifter. Not like you, anyway. Not like her. The phrasing sent ice down her spine despite the warmth of wherever she was. She forced herself to sit up, ignoring the way the world tilted dangerously. Her eyes were adjusting now, finding shapes in the darkness. She was in a cave. That much was clear. The walls were rough stone, ancient and untouched by modern tools. And a few feet away, sitting on what looked like a natural stone shelf, was a man. At least she thought he was a man. He was watching her with eyes that caught what little light existed and threw it back in shades of silver and gold. Not shifter eyes, not human eyes. Something in between, something other. His face was sharp angles and strong bones, too beautiful to be fully masculine, but too harsh to be pretty. Dark hair fell past his shoulders, and even sitting still, he radiated a kind of controlled power that made her wolf, still flickering, still wrong, press close to the surface in response. What are you? The question came out before she could stop it, echoing Marcus's words from before the fall. The stranger smiled, and it wasn't a kind expression. Ah, there's the real question. Not why did you help me or how did I survive? Just what are you? Typical shifter curiosity. You didn't answer. No, I didn't. He stood in one fluid motion, graceful in a way that spoke of predatory instinct. Because the answer won't make you feel better, and you've had enough unpleasant truths for 1 week, I'd imagine. He was tall, she could see that now, and dressed in clothes that looked handmade, leather and linen stitched with care but worn with age. No modern technology, no pack markings, nothing to identify him as anything she'd ever encountered in her 26 years among shifters. Try me. She pushed to her feet, swaying but refusing to sit back down. Weakness was death. Her alpha had taught her that before he'd thrown her away. I'd been rejected, exiled, hunted, and apparently buried alive. Whatever you are can't be worse than what I've already been through. The stranger tilted his head, studying her with those impossible eyes. You know what I like about you? He didn't wait for her to answer. You've got fire. Most wolves in your position would be curled up in a ball, drowning in rejection sickness, begging for their pack. But you're standing there, bleeding from half-healed wounds, and demanding answers like you've got any leverage at all. Do I? She asked. Have leverage? No. Simple. Direct. Brutal. You're in my territory now, little wolf. A place your kind hasn't set foot in for 300 years. The only reason you're breathing is because I decided you were more interesting alive than dead. So if I were you, I'd be very, very careful about what demands I made. Fear should have swamped her, should have driven her to her knees. But she'd burned through all her fear in the storm, running from wolves who'd once loved her. All that was left was anger and exhaustion, and a reckless need to understand what the hell was happening to her. Fine. She crossed her arms, immediately regretted it as pain flared in her side. Then answer me this. What happened to me up there? The silver light, the heat, the ground splitting open, what was that? The stranger's expression shifted, something flickering behind his eyes that might have been concern or fascination. Hard to tell in the dim light. That, he said slowly, was your wolf waking up. She laughed, the sound harsh and broken. My wolf's been awake since I was 13. I know what shifting feels like, and that wasn't it. I didn't say your wolf was shifting. He moved closer, each step deliberate, measured. I said it was waking up, as in for the first time, as in everything you've been experiencing your entire life was just preparation, a shadow of what you actually are. The words didn't make sense, couldn't make sense. She'd been a shifter her whole life, had her first shift at 13, same as everyone else, had learned to control it, to hunt with it, to fight with it. She knew her wolf, knew its moods, its instincts, its strengths and weaknesses. Didn't she? You're not making sense. But even as she said it, something in her chest tightened, a recognition she didn't want to acknowledge. No, I'm making perfect sense. You're just not ready to hear it. He was close now, close enough that she could see the details of his face, the faint scars along his jaw, the way his pupils weren't quite round. Tell me something. When was the last time you felt completely in control of your wolf? When was the last time your power didn't feel like it was fighting you for dominance? Never. The answer rose unbidden, unwelcome. Her wolf had always been stronger than she could fully control, always pushing at the edges of her restraint. She'd thought everyone dealt with that, thought it was normal. The rejection broke something in you, the stranger continued, his voice dropping lower, almost gentle. Shattered the blocks that were keeping your real power dormant. And now it's trying to come through, trying to emerge, and your human mind is too small to contain what's happening. Blocks? She shook her head, backing up a step. What blocks? Who would... Your parents. He said it like it was obvious. Or whoever raised you. Standard practice for your bloodline. Lock down the power until you're old enough, strong enough, stable enough to handle the truth. Except somewhere along the way, they died or disappeared or decided not to tell you, and you've been walking around with a live bomb in your chest this whole time. Her parents had died when she was 16. Car accident. Swift and brutal and final. They'd never told her anything about blocks or bloodlines or dormant power, had never even hinted that she was anything other than a normal shifter, unless they hadn't had time. What bloodline? The question came out barely above a whisper. The stranger smiled again, and this time there was something almost sad in it. That little wolf is a much longer story, one that requires food and rest and you not collapsing again. But the short version? He paused, letting the weight of whatever he was about to say settle between them. You're not pack wolf. You never were. You're something older, something the packs have spent centuries trying to forget exists. The cave seemed to shrink around her, the walls pressing in, the air too thick to breathe. She wanted to call him a liar, wanted to rage against the impossibility of what he was saying, but she couldn't, because deep down, in a place she'd spent her whole life ignoring, she'd always known she was different, had always felt like she didn't quite fit in the shape the pack wanted her to fill. What am I? The question that had echoed through her mind since the silver light first ignited, the question she was terrified to have answered. The stranger reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he touched his fingers to her forehead, and power sparked between them, ancient and vast and utterly foreign. You, he said, his voice resonating with something that sounded like truth, are moonborn, first blood. A direct descendant of the original wolves who walked under the first moon and were changed by its light. The packs are diluted, little wolf, watered down by centuries of breeding with humans, of forgetting the old ways. But you? He pulled his hand back, and she could still feel the echo of his touch burning on her skin. You're pure. And that silver fire trying to consume you? That's not destruction. That's awakening. She opened her mouth to respond, to question, to argue, but her legs chose that moment to give out completely. She would have hit the ground if he hadn't caught her, his arms surprisingly strong for someone who looked half-starved. Easy, he murmured, lowering her back to the furs she'd been lying on. Told you that you needed rest. Moonborn, she repeated, the word feeling strange on her tongue. I've never heard of... No one has, not anymore. He settled beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him. Warmer than a normal person, but not quite shifter hot. The packs made sure of that, hunted down the bloodlines, killed most of them, scattered the rest. Can't have wolves who don't need a pack to survive, can't have power structures that threaten the alpha hierarchy. So they erased you from history, called you myths, legends, stories to scare pups. But I lived in a pack. Her mind was struggling to keep up, exhaustion dragging at her thoughts. I was pack for 26 years. Because you didn't know what you were. Because the power was locked down tight enough that you seemed normal. Stronger than average, maybe. Harder to control, but nothing that would raise red flags. He paused. Until your alpha tried to complete a mate bond with you. Her breath caught. How did you... It's the only thing that makes sense. Mate bonds are powerful magic. Ancient magic. They dig deep into a wolf's core, intertwine souls. If he tried to bond with you, tried to mark you as his, the magic would have hit those blocks like a battering ram, started destabilizing them, made your power erratic, dangerous, unpredictable. The memory rose like bile. Her alpha's confusion when the bond wouldn't take properly, the way he'd looked at her with growing suspicion, growing fear, the whispered conversations with his second that she wasn't supposed to overhear, the gradual shift from beloved mate to potential threat. He'd rejected her because she'd become dangerous to him, because whatever he'd sensed in her terrified the part of him that needed absolute control. He felt it, she whispered. Felt something wrong with me. That's why he cast you out before you could become a problem. The stranger's voice was hard now, cold with an anger that wasn't directed at her. Typical pack mentality. Destroy what you don't understand. Better to kill the Moonborn than risk her awakening and threatening the established order. Moonborn. The word kept echoing in her head, foreign and familiar all at once. If what you're saying is true, she said carefully, if I'm this Moonborn thing, what happens now? The power woke up. The blocks are broken. Do I just, what, explode? Eventually, if you don't learn to control it. He shifted, pulling something from a pouch at his belt, a small crystal clear as water that caught the dim light and threw it back in rainbow patterns. Moonborn power isn't like pack magic. It doesn't answer to alpha hierarchy or pack bonds. It's wild, primal, connected to the moon itself, to the oldest magic that ever touched this world. Without training, without someone to teach you the old ways, it'll burn through you like wildfire through dry grass. And let me guess. She was too tired for fear now, had crossed some threshold where exhaustion trumped terror. You're going to teach me. Someone has to. He tucked the crystal away. And I'm the only one left who knows how. Why? The question that mattered most. Why help me? You said yourself, I'm in your territory uninvited. You don't owe me anything. So why not just let the power burn itself out and be done with it? The stranger was quiet for a long moment, his strange eyes distant, focused on something she couldn't see. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than before, weighted with old grief. Because 300 years ago, I made a promise to someone I loved, a Moonborn like you, and I broke that promise when I couldn't save her from the packs, couldn't stop them from hunting her down and putting her in the ground like an animal. He met her gaze, and she saw something raw and painful in his expression. I won't break it twice. I won't watch another Moonborn die because I was too afraid or too selfish to do what needed to be done. The confession hung between them, heavy with loss and regret, and a determination that felt absolute. She should have questioned him more, should have demanded details, explanations, proof of any of what he was saying. But exhaustion was pulling her under, and the furs beneath her were soft, and for the first time since the rejection, she felt almost safe. "What's your name?" she asked, her eyes already sliding closed. "Kyle." The name rolled off his tongue like an incantation. "And you?" "Arya." Her own name felt strange now, like it belonged to someone else, someone who died in the snow and hadn't realized it yet. "Rest, Arya." Kyle's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Tomorrow, we begin your real education. Tomorrow, you learn what it means to be Moonborn." She wanted to respond, wanted to ask 1,000 more questions, but sleep claimed her before she could form the words. Her last conscious thought was of silver fire and cracked earth, and a stranger with impossible eyes who'd promised to teach her how to become something her pack had spent centuries trying to destroy. And somewhere deep in her chest, in that hollow place where her wolf should be, something stirred. Not the familiar presence she'd known her whole life, but something vast and ancient and hungry for the moon. Something that whispered in a language she didn't know she understood. Chapter 2. The Unexpected Savior. The dream started the way all her dreams had started since childhood, with the moon, full and impossibly bright, hanging low over a forest that existed nowhere in the waking world. Trees older than memory, their roots buried so deep they touched the bones of the earth. And running through that forest, a wolf made of starlight and shadow singing to the moon in a language that predated words. But this time, the dream shifted. The wolf stopped running, turned to face her with eyes that burned silver white, and spoke. This is not a dream. Arya woke with a gasp, her hand flying to her chest where her heart hammered like it was trying to escape. The cave was still dark, still quiet, but something had changed. The air felt charged, electric, like the moment before lightning strikes. Kale was gone. She sat up slowly, testing her body's response. The pain in her side had dulled to a manageable ache, and her feet, which should have been destroyed by miles of running through frozen forest, felt almost normal. Whatever Kyle had done while she slept, whatever strange magic he'd worked, had accelerated her healing beyond anything pack medicine could achieve. But it was the other change that made her breath catch. The hollow place in her chest where her wolf had been, that empty, aching void, wasn't empty anymore. Something was there. Not her familiar wolf, not the creature she'd known for 13 years. But something bigger. Something that made her old wolf feel like a shadow puppet compared to the real thing. She stood, surprised by how steady her legs felt, and moved toward the cave entrance. Or what she assumed was the entrance, a narrow opening in the stone that let in a thread of pale light. The moment she stepped through, the world opened up. She wasn't in a cave, or rather, she was in a cave system so vast it defied belief. The chamber she'd been sleeping in was just one small pocket in a network that stretched in every direction, lit by some kind of luminescent fungus that covered the walls in patterns that looked almost deliberate, almost like writing, and at the center of it all, carved into the living rock, was a den that looked like it had been designed by someone who understood that wolves needed more than shelter. They needed sanctuary. "You're awake." The voice didn't come from Coil. Arya spun, her hand instinctively reaching for a weapon she didn't have, and found herself staring at a man who made every instinct in her body scream two contradictory warnings simultaneously: run and submit. He stood at the far end of the chamber, perfectly still in a way that reminded her of predators waiting for prey to make the first move. Tall, easily 6.5 feet, with shoulders broad enough to carry the weight he clearly did. Dark hair fell to his collar, and even from a distance, she could see the way the dim light caught in eyes that were neither fully gold nor fully human. This was not Kyle. Kale had been beautiful in an otherworldly way, sharp and fey-like. This man was beautiful in the way a blade was beautiful, deadly, precise, built for a specific purpose. And that purpose, every line of his body suggested, was dominance. "Who are you?" Her voice came out steadier than she felt, which was something. "I could ask you the same question." He moved then, just a few steps forward, and she had to fight the urge to back up. But I already know the answer. Arya Blackwood, formerly of the Silvercrest Pack, currently exiled, currently dying of rejection sickness and power overflow, currently standing in territory that should have killed you the moment you crossed the border. Her blood went cold. "How do you know my name?" "The same way I know everything that happens in my territory." He took another step, and this time she did back up, not from fear, at least not entirely, but because her wolf, that new massive presence in her chest, was reacting to him in ways that terrified her. "I've been watching the borders for weeks, waiting. Kale said you'd come eventually. I didn't believe him. I should have known better." Kale. She latched onto the familiar name like a lifeline. "Where is he? What did you do with him?" The man's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Amusement, maybe, or irritation at being questioned. "Kyle is old and powerful and perfectly capable of taking care of himself. He's gathering supplies, things you'll need if you're going to survive what's coming." And what's coming? "Your awakening." He said it like it was obvious, like she should have figured it out already. "The power Kale told you about? The moonborn magic trying to surface? It's going to get worse before it gets better, much worse. And when it peaks, every shifter within 100 miles is going to feel it, including your former pack." The implication hit her like a physical blow. They'll come for me. They're already coming for you. He crossed the remaining distance between them in 3 smooth strides, and suddenly he was close enough that she could see the faint scars along his jaw, the way his pupils weren't quite round, the absolute control it took for him to stand this close to her without his wolf showing through. They tracked you to the edge of my territory. Would have followed you in if I hadn't made it very clear what would happen to anyone stupid enough to cross my borders uninvited. Her mouth went dry. You stopped them. I sent them running with their tails between their legs. His voice carried an edge now, something dark and satisfied. Your alpha included. Turns out pack alphas aren't so confident when they're facing someone who doesn't play by their rules. The image formed unbidden in her mind. Her former alpha, the man who'd thrown her away like garbage, forced to retreat by this stranger. Part of her, the part that was still raw from rejection, felt a vicious satisfaction at the thought. But the rest of her, the part that understood pack politics and territorial disputes, felt sick. You picked a fight with Silvercrest. It wasn't a question. Do you have any idea what you've done? They're one of the largest packs in the region. If they decide you're a threat, they already decided I'm a threat. They decided that the moment they were founded 300 years ago. He tilted his head, studying her with an intensity that made her feel naked despite being fully clothed. Let me guess. Your pack told you stories about the mountain territories, about how they're cursed, about how any wolf who ventures too far into the peaks never comes back. She had heard those stories. Every pup in Silvercrest had. The mountains were forbidden, taboo, spoken of in whispers around the pack fire as a place where the old magic still lived, and wolves who forgot their place went to die. They're not cursed, she said slowly, understanding dawning. They're claimed. Finally. He smiled, and it was not a kind expression. Yes, they're claimed. By me, by Kyle. By the few others who remember what this world was like before the packs carved it up and called themselves kings. We hold the mountains, we hold the borders, and we make very sure that pack wolves understand that their territories end where ours begin. The weight of what he was saying settled over her like a physical thing. You're the reason Silvercrest never expanded north. Why no pack has claimed the mountain regions? I'm one of the reasons. He paused, and something shifted in his expression, something that might have been old grief or old anger, hard to tell which. The packs would love to take these mountains. The territory is rich, defensible, perfect for a strong pack looking to grow. But every time they try, every time some ambitious alpha decides he's going to be the one to finally conquer the cursed peaks, we remind them why their ancestors learned to fear this place. The way he said "we" made her wonder exactly how many others were hiding in these mountains, how many wolves, or whatever Kale and this man were, had made it their mission to hold back the packs. Who are you? She asked the question again, but this time with different weight, this time demanding more than just a name. He looked at her for a long moment, and she got the distinct impression he was deciding how much truth she could handle. My name is Theron, he said finally. And before you ask, yes, I know who you are, what you are. Kale filled me in while you were unconscious. Moonborn, first blood, the last of a line we thought had died out decades ago. The way he said it made her chest tighten. You knew others like me. I knew many others like you. His voice went flat, emotionless in the way that meant the emotions underneath were too big to let surface. Before the purges, before the packs decided that anyone who didn't fit into their hierarchy was a threat that needed to be eliminated. I knew Moonborn who could call storms with their voices. I knew wolves who could walk between shadows. I knew shifters who were so connected to the moon's power that they could heal mortal wounds with a touch. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. I knew them. I fought beside them. and I watched them die one by one because I wasn't strong enough to protect them all. The confession hung between them, raw and painful. Arya wanted to say something comforting, something that acknowledged the loss carved into every word, but before she could form a response, her wolf surged, not gently. Not like a familiar presence requesting attention, but violently, desperately, like something caged that had just realized the bars were weaker than it thought. She gasped, doubling over as power flooded her veins. Silver fire, just like in the storm, but hotter now, hungrier. Her vision whited out and she felt herself falling forward. Theron caught her before she hit the ground, his hands impossibly strong on her arms. "Breathe," he commanded, his voice cutting through the roar of power in her head. "Don't fight it. Don't try to push it down. Just let it move through you." "It burns," she managed, her fingers digging into his forearms, hard enough to draw blood if he'd been human. "It feels like it's tearing me apart." "That's because you're still thinking of it as separate from you. It's not. It's you, the real you, trying to break through the shell you've been living in your whole life." His hands moved to her shoulders, steadying her, and she could feel his wolf pressing against her awareness, massive and ancient and utterly controlled. "Look at me." She forced her eyes open, found his face inches from hers. This close, she could see that his eyes weren't just gold. They were layered, multiple shades shifting and changing like sunlight through amber. Beautiful and terrifying and completely inhuman. "You are not dying," he said, each word deliberate. "You are being born, for the first time. And yes, it hurts. Yes, it's terrifying. But you will survive it. Do you understand me?" She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him he didn't understand, that this was different, that something was wrong. But then his wolf touched hers. Not aggressively, not dominant, but steady, grounding, like an anchor in a storm. And her wolf, that vast new thing inside her chest, recognized him. The recognition slammed into her with enough force to steal her breath. Her wolf knew his wolf, not from this life, not from her time in Silvercrest, but from somewhere deeper, somewhere older, a memory buried in blood and bone and passed down through generations. "Pack," her wolf whispered. Not the pack she'd known, not the pack that had cast her out, but something older, something that predated modern hierarchies and territorial disputes. First pack, true pack, moon pack. "No," she breathed, even as her body swayed toward his, drawn by recognition her conscious mind couldn't process. "That's not possible. You can't be—" "I can be exactly what you think I am." Theron's voice was gentler now, but no less intense. "I am the last Alpha King, the last wolf who remembers what it meant to lead not through dominance, but through connection to the moon itself. And you, Arya Blackwood, are the first moonborn I've encountered in 73 years who has the potential to be what we all once were. Alpha King." The title resonated through her, ancient and terrible and true. There hadn't been an Alpha King in living memory. Pack history taught that they were legends, myths from the early days of shifter civilization. Wolves so powerful they ruled not just one pack, but all packs. Beings who answered to the moon itself and held their authority through more than just strength and fear. The packs had killed them all, or so the stories went. How? The question came out broken, her voice shaking as badly as her hands. "How did you survive? If the packs hunted down all the moonborn, all the old bloodlines, how are you still—" "Because I'm very good at killing those who try to kill me." Simple, direct, and underneath the words, an ocean of violence. "And because I had help, Kyle, others like him, beings who are old enough and strange enough that pack wolves learned quickly to leave them alone. We carved out this territory with blood and magic, and a promise that anyone who challenged us would learn exactly why their ancestors feared the mountains. The silver fire in her veins was subsiding now, draining away and leaving her weak, shaking, but somehow more stable than before, as if Theron's presence, his wolf's steady anchor, had helped her channel the power instead of being consumed by it. "Why did you help me?" She forced herself to straighten, to step back from his touch, even though every instinct in her was screaming to stay close to that anchor. "You said you've been watching the borders, waiting. Why? What do you want from me? Be honest. Would you trust a man who knew your name before you spoke it? A man who claimed to be something that shouldn't exist? Who offered protection but hadn't explained the price?" Theron's expression shifted, something calculating entering his eyes. "What do I want? I want what Kyle wants, what every survivor of the old ways wants. I want the bloodlines restored. I want the Moonborn to walk this earth again without fear of being hunted. I want the packs to remember that they are not the ultimate authority, that there are older powers in this world, and that those powers are waking up." He paused, and his next words felt like a blade sliding between her ribs. "And I want you to be strong enough to survive what's coming, because whether you accept it or not, your awakening has already been felt. Every alpha within 500 miles knows something changed when you fell through the earth, and they're going to come looking for you, not to help, not to save, but to kill you before you become the threat they all know you can be." The truth of it hit her like cold water. She'd been so focused on surviving the immediate danger, the storm, the hunters, the rejection, that she hadn't thought about the larger implications, hadn't considered what it meant that she'd release that kind of power where other packs could sense it. "My former pack," she said slowly. "You said they're already coming. Your former pack." The Blood Moon pack from the Western Territories, the Shadow Fang pack from the East, every ambitious alpha who thinks he can add "killed a Moonborn" to his list of accomplishments. Theron's voice was matter of fact, like he was discussing the weather. "They'll come. Some openly demanding I hand you over, others through stealth, sending hunters in the night, and a few, the smart ones, will wait to see what you become, before deciding if you're a threat or a potential ally." Ally. She nearly laughed. "I'm not an ally to anyone. I'm a lone wolf dying of rejection, sickness, and power I don't understand. What could I possibly offer an alpha that would make me valuable? Everything." The word was absolute. You could offer everything. A true Moonborn, fully awakened, properly trained, you'd be the most powerful wolf in this generation. Possibly several generations. Alphas would kill to have you in their pack, would kill to mate you, to have your bloodline strengthen theirs, would kill to prevent anyone else from having you if they couldn't claim you themselves. The implications made her stomach turn. So I'm a prize, a weapon, something to be fought over and claimed. To them, yes. Theron moved closer again, and this time she didn't back up. "To me, you're something different. You're proof that the old bloodlines can survive, that everything we lost isn't gone forever, that maybe, we can rebuild what the packs destroyed." "I don't want to rebuild anything." The words came out sharper than intended. "I just want to survive. I want to understand what's happening to me. I want—" She stopped, swallowed hard. "I want to stop hurting." Something in Theron's expression softened just slightly. "The rejection sickness. It's still eating at you." It wasn't a question, but she nodded anyway. The bond her alpha had tried to force, the one that had destabilized her power and ultimately led to her exile, was still there, still rotting inside her like a wound that refused to heal. She could feel it, a constant ache in her chest, a whisper of pain every time her heart beat. "I accepted his rejection," she said quietly. "I said the words. It should have broken the bond. Why hasn't it broken? Theron was quiet for a long moment, his jaw tight. When he spoke, his voice carried an anger that wasn't directed at her. Because he didn't do it properly. He tried to force a mate bond with a moonborn without understanding what he was doing. The magic latched on, dug deep, and when he tried to sever it, he did it wrong. Cut it off at the surface level, but left the roots buried in your soul. Can it be fixed? Yes, but not easily, and not without pain. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and pressed his hand flat against her chest, right over her heart. The bond has to be burned out completely, torn free root and branch. It's going to hurt worse than anything you've felt so far, worse than the rejection, worse than the awakening. But if it's not removed, it'll eventually kill you, slow poison from a bond that was never meant to exist. She looked down at his hand, felt the heat of it even through her shirt. Can you do it? Remove the bond? I can try, but my wolf touching that deep might trigger your awakening early. Might cause your power to surge before you're ready to control it. His eyes met hers, and she saw the calculation there, the weighing of risks. Or we wait. Let Kale teach you control first, give you time to stabilize before attempting something this dangerous. How long would that take? Weeks, maybe months. I don't have months. She knew it in her bones, the way she knew her own name. The bond was killing her, yes, but it was also drawing attention. Every wolf with any sensitivity could feel it, a broken mate bond left ragged and infected. It was like bleeding in shark-infested waters. If I wait, if I give the other packs time to mobilize, to plan, what chance do I have? Theron's hand was still pressed against her chest, and she could feel his wolf assessing her, measuring her strength, her determination, her capacity to survive what he was proposing. Honestly, slim. But better than if you try this now and it breaks you completely. I'm already broken. The admission came out before she could stop it. My pack threw me away. My alpha shredded our bond. I lost everything I thought I was. What's a little more breaking? That's the rejection sickness talking, making you reckless, making you think you have nothing left to lose. Don't I? She held his gaze, refusing to flinch from the intensity of it. Tell me honestly, if I do nothing, if I try to run, if I attempt to hide and wait this out, what happens? Do I survive? The silence stretched between them, heavy and damning. No, he said finally. You don't. Not without help, not without training. Not without someone strong enough to hold the other alphas back while you learn to hold yourself together. Then we do it now. The decision settled in her chest, solid and sure. We burn out the bond, trigger the awakening, deal with whatever comes, because at least that's moving forward. At least that's choosing to fight instead of waiting to die. Theron studied her for another long moment, and she got the impression he was seeing something in her that surprised him. You're sure? Once we start this, there's no stopping, no going back. Your life, as you knew it, ends completely. My life as I knew it ended the moment he said, I reject you. She placed her hand over his, pressing it more firmly against her chest. I'm sure. Do it. He nodded once, something like respect flickering in his expression. This is gonna hurt. Everything hurts already. Not like this. And then his power hit her like a freight train. It wasn't gentle, wasn't careful, wasn't anything like the careful control he'd shown before. This was raw alpha dominance, ancient and absolute, crashing into her chest like a battering ram made of moonlight and fury. She felt the moment his wolf touched the broken bond, felt it like hooks tearing through her soul. The pain was immediate and overwhelming, white-hot and all-consuming. She would have screamed, but she couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything except endure, as Theron's power wrapped around the rotting remnants of her alpha's claim and pulled. The bond fought back. Of course it did. It was dying. but it was still magic. Still trying to fulfill its purpose even though that purpose had been destroyed. It clung to her with desperation, with the mindless hunger of something that knew its existence was ending. "Don't fight me," Theron growled, his voice resonating with power that made her bones vibrate. "Don't try to hold on to it. Let it go. Let me burn it out." But she wasn't holding on to it. She was just trying to survive as two massive powers waged war inside her chest. Theron's dominance against her former alpha's claim. Old magic against broken magic. And she was the battlefield, being torn apart by forces she couldn't begin to control. Her wolf surged, that vast new presence erupting in response to the threat. Silver fire blazed through her veins, and somewhere far away, she heard Theron curse. "That's it," he said, and there was satisfaction in his voice now, grim and fierce. "Let your power rise. Let it help me burn away the poison." Her power and his met somewhere in the center of her chest, where the bond had wrapped itself around her heart. For a moment, one terrifying, disorienting moment, she felt completely merged with him, felt his wolf as clearly as her own, felt his strength, his determination, the absolute certainty that he would see this through no matter what it cost. And underneath all that, she felt his loneliness, the vast, aching emptiness of someone who'd survived when everyone he'd cared about had died. Then the bond shattered. It didn't fade, didn't gradually weaken. It shattered, exploding outward in a blast of force that threw her back against the cave wall and sent Theron staggering. She hit the stone hard enough to see stars, slid down to the ground in a heap, and for several long seconds, she couldn't do anything except gasp for air and try to remember how to exist. The pain was gone, not dulled, not managed, gone. The constant ache in her chest, the whisper of suffering with every heartbeat, the sensation of something rotting inside her, all of it had vanished in the space between one breath and the next. She pressed her hand to her chest, felt her heart beating strong and steady beneath her palm. Normal. Whole. Free. "Breathe," Theron said from somewhere nearby. He sounded winded, which shouldn't have been possible for someone with his power. "Just breathe. Your body needs time to adjust." She dragged her eyes open, found him leaning against the opposite wall, watching her with an intensity that should have been uncomfortable, but somehow wasn't. There was blood at the corner of his mouth. She'd hurt him somehow, though she couldn't remember how, and his eyes were pure gold now, his wolf riding close to the surface. "It's gone," she whispered. "The bond. I can't feel it anymore. Because it's dead, completely destroyed. Your former alpha could stand in front of you right now and you wouldn't feel even a flicker of connection." He pushed off the wall, moved toward her with a slight limp that suggested she'd done more damage than just making him bleed. "How do you feel?" "I feel..." She searched for words, found them inadequate. Empty, but in a good way. Like something toxic was taking up space and now it's gone and I can finally breathe properly. That's normal. The emptiness will fade. In a few days, you won't remember what it felt like to carry a broken bond. He crouched in front of her, close enough that she could see the way his pupils were still slightly elongated, still not quite human. "But there's something else you need to know, something that happened when we broke the bond." The seriousness in his tone made her stomach tighten. "What?" "Our wolves touched. Deeply. When your power rose to help me burn out the bond, when our magic merged, they made contact in a way that doesn't happen often, in a way that..." He stopped, jaw tightening. "In a way that created a resonance." Resonance. She didn't like the sound of that word. What does that mean? It means our wolves recognize each other now. It means they'll be drawn to each other, want to be near each other. It's not a mate bond. Nothing like what your alpha tried to force. But it's a connection. One that will make certain things complicated. The implications crashed over her. A connection to an alpha king, to a wolf so powerful the packs feared him, to a man who'd just proven he could tear through her defenses like they were made of paper. How complicated? That depends on what you choose to do with it. He stood, offering her his hand. It can be ignored, suppressed, treated as nothing more than a tactical alliance, or it can be acknowledged, explored, used to strengthen both of us as the fight ahead gets worse. She looked at his hand, at the blood still drying on his knuckles from where his claws had extended during the bond breaking, looked up at his face, at the scars and the ancient eyes and the expression that said he'd accept whatever choice she made. And then, because she was apparently incapable of making sensible decisions when her world was falling apart, she took his hand. The moment their skin touched, the resonance flared, not overwhelming, not painful, but present, undeniable. A hum in her chest that said yes, this, pack, safe, home. Theron pulled her to her feet, steady and strong, and didn't let go immediately. "Your hunters are back," he said quietly. "I can feel them at the border. 6 wolves, your former pack plus 2 from Blood Moon. They're demanding I turn you over." Fear spiked through her, immediate and visceral. "What are you going to do?" His smile was sharp enough to cut. "I'm going to remind them why their ancestors learned to fear this mountain, and you're going to stay here, safely behind wards that will hide you from any wolf who comes looking." He finally released her hand, stepped back. "This is going to get ugly. Are you ready for that? Ready for me to kill wolves in your name?" She should have said no, should have told him to send her away, to let the hunters have her, to avoid the bloodshed. But when she opened her mouth, different words came out. "Yes." He nodded once, satisfied, and turned toward the cave entrance. But before he left, he looked back over his shoulder, and there was something almost gentle in his expression. "Welcome to the pack, Arya. Your life is about to get very complicated." Then he was gone, moving with a speed that left her blinking at empty air, and she was alone in the cave, listening to the sound of her own heartbeat, strong, steady, free, and wondering what the hell she'd just agreed to. Outside, in the distance, a howl rose, challenging, demanding. Her former pack, calling for blood, and from somewhere deeper in the cave system, she heard Theron's answering roar. Not a howl, but something older, something that made every wolf instinct in her body snap to attention and whisper, "Alpha King, true alpha, Moon's chosen." The battle had begun, and she, whether she was ready or not, was at the center of it. Chapter 3. The silence after Theron left was worse than the howling. Arya stood in the center of the cave, her hand still tingling from where he'd held it, and tried to process the fact that somewhere above her, wolves were about to die. Wolves she'd known, wolves she'd trained with, eaten with, laughed with in better times. And they were going to die because of her. Because she'd fallen into territory she shouldn't have entered. Because she'd survived when maybe she should have just let the storm take her. Her legs gave out, and she sank to the ground, pressing her back against the cool stone wall. The absence of the broken bond should have felt like relief, and it did, in a way. But it also left her feeling unmoored, untethered. For months, even in its poisonous, dying state, the bond had been something to hold on to. Proof that she'd once been wanted, once been chosen, once been worth something to someone. Now even that was gone. The memory rose before she could stop it, sharp and vivid and merciless. She'd been 7 years old the first time the elders had called her unstable. The pack had gathered for the autumn hunt, everyone shifting together in the clearing behind the pack house. Children were expected to watch and learn, to absorb the unity and power of the pack in motion, to understand what it meant to be part of something larger than themselves. Little Arya had watched her parents shift, watched the smooth, practiced transformation from human to wolf, the way their bodies flowed like water into new shapes, beautiful, natural, right. And she'd wanted so badly to join them. The shift had hit her like lightning, striking from a clear sky. One moment she was human, small and excited, and 7 years old. The next she was wolf. But not just wolf. She'd erupted into her shifted form with enough force to crack the ground beneath her paws, and the power that had flooded through her had lit up the clearing like someone had set off a flare. Silver light. Everywhere. Pouring from her fur, her eyes, her open mouth as she'd thrown her head back and howled with pure, overwhelming joy. The joy had lasted exactly 3 seconds before she'd felt her mother's terror spike through their connection. The pack had scattered, actually scattered, like she was a threat instead of a child. And the elders, the ancient wolves who remembered the old stories, who carried the pack's history in their bones, had gone completely still, staring at her with expressions that 7-year-old Arya hadn't understood but had instinctively known meant danger. "Impossible," Elder Margaret had whispered, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent clearing. "That bloodline was eliminated. We made sure. We all made sure." Her father had shifted back to human, had placed himself between Arya and the gathered wolves, with his hands raised in a placating gesture. "She's just a child, a late bloomer with strong power. It doesn't mean—" "It means exactly what we think it means." Elder Thomas, ancient and grizzled, his wolf's muzzle gone gray with age. "Look at her, James. Look at the light. Look at the way the other wolves are reacting. That's not pack magic. That's not normal." Normal. The word that would haunt her for the next 19 years. Her mother had scooped her up. She'd been small even in wolf form, barely larger than a large dog, and carried her away from the gathering, away from the stares and the whispers and the fear that had replaced what should have been celebration. That night, pressed between her parents in their small cabin on the edge of Packlands, Arya had heard them arguing in hushed, desperate tones. "We have to tell her," her mother had insisted. "She needs to know what she is, what she could become. If we tell her, it makes it real. If we tell her, the elders will have no choice but to report it to the Alpha. And you know what happens then. She's our daughter, James. We can't just— we can. We have to, for her safety, for ours. We keep it buried. We teach her control. We make sure she seems as normal as possible until she's old enough, strong enough, positioned well enough that the pack needs her more than they fear her." Young Arya hadn't understood most of what she'd heard, hadn't grasped the implications, but she'd understood the fear in her parents' voices, had understood that something about her was wrong, dangerous, something that needed to be hidden. The next day, they'd taken her deep into the woods, far from the pack house and any curious ears. And her father had done something that had felt like pressing his hands into her chest and rearranging her insides. She'd screamed. God, how she'd screamed. It had felt like dying, like being compressed into a box too small to hold her, like everything that made her was being shoved down and locked away. "I'm sorry, sweetheart," her father had whispered, tears streaming down his face even as he'd held the magic in place. "I'm so sorry, but this is the only way. This is the only way to keep you safe." The silver light had died. The overwhelming power had dimmed to something manageable, something that looked normal to anyone who wasn't paying close attention. And Arya had learned to be small, to be controlled, to be exactly what the pack expected and nothing more. The memory faded, leaving her gasping in the present-day cave, her hand pressed to her chest, where her father's magic had once held everything locked down tight. He'd been trying to protect her. She understood that now, understood it in a way 7-year-old Arya couldn't have. But he'd also stolen years from her, years where she could have been learning to control her real power instead of suppressing it, years where she could have understood what she was instead of thinking she was broken. They died before they could tell her the truth. Car accident on a wet road, instant, final. And with them had died any explanation for what she was, why she was different, how to handle the power that had been locked inside her like a bomb, waiting for the right trigger. She'd been 16, old enough to be considered adult by pack standards, but young enough to still need guidance, still need family. The pack had kept her on, but barely. The elders had watched her like hawks, waiting for any sign that the strangeness they'd sensed in her as a child was resurging. And Arya had made herself perfect, had trained harder than anyone else, had followed every rule, exceeded every expectation, made herself indispensable, had fallen in love with the Alpha's son like the stupid, desperate girl she'd been. Marcus Silvercrest, future Alpha, strong, confident, charismatic, everything a young wolf could want in a mate. And he'd chosen her publicly, definitively in front of the whole pack during the summer solstice celebration. She'd been 23, he'd been 25, and she'd thought she'd finally proven herself, finally earned her place, finally become normal enough to be wanted. The courtship had been brief. 3 months of Marcus showing her off, claiming her in small ways, his scent on her clothes, his mark on her neck, his promise that she'd be his mate, his Luna, his forever. The pack had approved. The elders had seemed satisfied that she'd grown into a stable, controlled adult. Even her wolf, still compressed, still locked down, had seemed content. Then he'd tried to complete the mate bond. The memory of that night still made her nauseous. They'd been in his quarters, alone, the pack house quiet around them. He'd been gentle at first, careful, treating her like something precious, and she'd let herself believe it was real. Let herself believe he loved her the way she loved him. The bond magic had started the way it was supposed to, a warmth in her chest, a pull toward him, a sense of two souls beginning to intertwine. Normal. Right. Everything she'd dreamed of. Then her power had woken up, not slowly, not gradually, but violently, explosively, as the mate bond magic had crashed into her father's locks and shattered them like glass. Silver fire had erupted from her skin. She'd felt her wolf, her real wolf, the vast thing that had been compressed for 16 years, surge toward the surface with a hunger that terrified her. And the bond magic, caught between Marcus's attempt to claim her and her power's violent awakening, had twisted into something agonizing. Marcus had screamed, actually screamed, stumbling back from her like she'd burned him, which, she realized later, she probably had. The silver light had been hot enough to scorch the sheets, hot enough to leave blisters on his hands where he'd touched her. "What the fuck are you?" He'd stared at her with eyes gone wide with fear and fury. "What the fuck is that?" She'd tried to answer, tried to explain that she didn't know, that something was wrong, that she needed help. But her wolf had been too close to the surface, her power too wild, and all that had come out was a sound that was half human, half beast, and completely terrifying. He'd run. The future Alpha of Silvercrest, the wolf who'd promised her forever, had run from his own quarters and left her there, burning with silver fire and crying because she'd known, even in the chaos, even in the pain, that everything had just fallen apart. The elders had come within the hour, had found her still glowing, still unable to fully control the power now that the locks were broken. They'd looked at her with the same fear they'd shown when she was 7, except now it was worse. Now it was mixed with anger and betrayal, and the cold calculation of wolves deciding whether something was worth saving or better off dead. Elder Margaret had been the one to say it out loud. "Moonborn. She's moonborn. Her parents must have locked it down, hidden it from us. And now it's awake." The word had spread through the pack like wildfire. Moonborn, a thing from old stories, a bloodline that should have been extinct, a power that threatened the carefully maintained hierarchy every pack depended on. Marcus had avoided her for 3 weeks after that. 3 weeks of Arya trying desperately to get her power back under control, trying to prove she wasn't a threat, trying to make herself small again even though small was no longer an option. When he'd finally called her to his office, he'd already ascended to Alpha by then, his father having stepped down early, she'd hoped he wanted to try again, to work through the problem together, to find a way forward. She'd been so fucking naive. "I'm sorry, Arya." He hadn't even looked at her when he'd said it, had kept his eyes on the papers on his desk like she wasn't worth his full attention. "I can't have you as my mate. The elders have made it clear that having a moonborn as Luna would destabilize the pack, and I can't put my feelings above the safety of my people." His feelings. Like he'd had any real feelings for her beyond what she could do for his image. "We can figure this out," she'd said, hearing the desperation in her own voice and hating it. "I can learn to control it. I can—" "You're unstable." Finally, he'd looked at her, and what she'd seen in his eyes had been worse than anger. It had been pity. "You've always been unstable. We all knew it, even when you were a child. Your parents hid it well, but it was always there, and now it's out, and there's no putting it back. Marcus, please. I, Marcus Silvercrest, Alpha of the Silvercrest Pack, reject you, Arya Blackwood, as my mate." The words had been formal, final, spoken with the weight of Alpha command behind them. "I sever any bond between us. I revoke my claim. I release you from any obligation to this pack." The bond, partial, malformed, twisted from the beginning, had tried to break, should have broken cleanly. But something had gone wrong, maybe because it was incomplete, maybe because her moonborn power had gotten tangled up in it. Maybe because Marcus had fucked up the severance the way he'd fucked up everything else. Instead of breaking cleanly, it had shattered halfway, left jagged edges inside her that bled and festered and poisoned her from the inside out. She'd felt it, felt the moment the bond went from painful to potentially lethal, had gasped, doubling over, her hand pressed to her chest as agony lanced through her. Marcus had watched, hadn't helped, hadn't even called for a healer, just watched as she'd struggled to breathe through the pain. "You need to leave," he'd said quietly. "Tonight. Before the pack decides you're enough of a threat to require a more permanent solution. I'm giving you a head start, Arya. Don't waste it." A head start. She'd laughed, the sound bitter and broken. "To run from my own pack. To be hunted like prey. You're not pack anymore. The moment I rejected you, you became a lone wolf, and lone wolves don't survive long in our world." He'd finally shown something like emotion then, regret maybe, or guilt. Hard to tell. "I'm sorry it came to this, but I chose my people over you. I had to. Can you understand that?" Could she understand? Could she look at a man who'd promised her everything and then thrown her away to save his own position and understand why he'd done it? The question had haunted her through her escape from Packlands, through the storm, through the desperate flight that had ended with her falling into Theron's territory. Did he do the right thing or the coward's thing? The question came from behind her, and Arya nearly jumped out of her skin. She spun, found Coyle standing in the shadows, watching her with those strange, knowing eyes. "How long have you been there?" Her voice came out rougher than intended, thick with the emotions the memories had dragged up. "Long enough." He moved into the light, carrying a bundle of supplies. "You were projecting pretty heavily, the kind of emotional resonance that happens when someone's reliving trauma. I figured I'd wait until you came back to the present before announcing myself." Projecting. Another thing she'd have to learn to control, another way her power was exposing her when she wanted nothing more than to hide. "To answer your unspoken question," Cale continued, setting the bundle down and settling onto a nearby rock, "your former Alpha did neither the right thing nor the coward's thing. He did the predictable thing. The thing any Pack Alpha would do when faced with something that threatens their authority. He said he chose his people over me." She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the warm air in the cave. "He made it sound noble, like he was sacrificing his own happiness for the greater good. He was sacrificing you to maintain his power. Kale's voice was flat, matter of fact. There's nothing noble about that. He sensed your potential, recognized that you could become powerful enough to challenge him, and eliminated the threat before it could mature. That's pack politics, brutal, efficient, and dressed up in pretty words about duty and responsibility. The blunt assessment should have hurt, but instead it felt like validation, like someone finally saying out loud what she'd known in her bones but been too afraid to acknowledge. He loved me, though. The words came out small, uncertain. Before he knew. Before my power woke up. I know he did. Maybe. Kale shrugged. Or maybe he loved the idea of you, the perfect pack wolf who'd make an excellent Luna, who'd strengthen his position and give him powerful heirs. But the moment you became real, became complicated and dangerous and something he couldn't control, that love disappeared pretty quickly, didn't it? It had. God, it had disappeared so fast she'd gotten whiplash. One moment he'd been promising her forever. The next he'd been looking at her like she was a monster. Why are you telling me this? She looked at Kyle, at his ancient face and older eyes. Why not let me believe it was noble? Why not let me think he cared? Because lies won't help you survive what's coming. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. You need to understand that pack alphas will always choose their power over their mates if the mate becomes a threat. Always. It's built into the system. And you, Arya Blackwood, are the biggest threat to that system that's existed in 300 years. Every alpha you encounter from this point forward will either want to kill you, control you, or fuck you in the hopes of binding your power to their bloodline. Love doesn't factor into any of those options. The brutal honesty was almost refreshing. No soft words, no careful phrasing meant to protect her feelings, just truth, harsh and clean. What about Theron? The question escaped before she could stop it. Kale's expression shifted, something that might have been amusement flickering across his features. What about him? He's an alpha, the alpha king, apparently. So which category does he fall into? Kill, control, or... She couldn't quite bring herself to say the last word. None of them. Kale sat back, and now he definitely was amused. Theron is different. He's old enough to remember what it was like before the pack system solidified, when wolves mated for partnership, not power. When Moonborn were treasured, not feared. He doesn't want to kill you, control you, or use you. He wants to protect you long enough for you to become powerful enough to protect yourself. And then what? Then you decide what you want to be, what you want to do with all that power once you can control it. Theron won't try to influence that choice. He might guide you, might offer advice, but ultimately, you're free to walk away if that's what you choose. The idea of freedom, real freedom, not the illusion of choice within pack constraints, was almost dizzying. Why? Why would he do that? What does he get out of protecting me if I might just leave? The satisfaction of knowing the Moonborn bloodlines survived. The hope that maybe someday there will be enough of you that the packs can't hunt you all down. Kale's voice went soft, tinged with old grief. And maybe in some small way, he's trying to make up for all the Moonborn he couldn't save, trying to balance the scales of a debt that can never really be repaid. The howling outside intensified, multiple voices joining in a chorus of challenge and fury. Her former pack, calling for blood, calling for her. And underneath their voices, she felt Theron's power surge, vast and terrible and utterly controlled, not responding to their challenge with his own howls, but with something older, something that predated words. The mountain itself seemed to shudder in response. He's reminding them why they fear this place, Kale said quietly, why their ancestors never pushed too far north, why the mountain territories have remained unclaimed for centuries. He's showing them what real power looks like. Arya moved to the cave entrance, drawn by morbid curiosity and a need to see what was happening. Kyle didn't stop her, just followed at a distance, ready to pull her back if she ventured too far. The cave opened onto a narrow ledge overlooking a steep valley, and down in that valley she could see them. 6 wolves, just like Theron had said. 5 she recognized from Silvercrest, including Marcus himself, his gray coat distinctive even from this distance. The 6th was massive and black, probably the blood moon representative. They'd formed a semicircle at the edge of what must have been the border, none of them willing to cross whatever invisible line separated Packlands from mountain territory. And standing on the mountainside, alone and utterly unafraid, was Theron. Even in human form, he radiated enough power that she could feel it from here. A pressure in the air, a weight that made her wolf press close to her consciousness in response. He wasn't shifted, wasn't threatening, was just standing there, arms crossed, looking at the 6 wolves like they were children throwing a tantrum. Marcus shifted to human, clearly designated as spokesman. Even from this distance, Arya could see the way he was trying to project confidence, trying to stand tall despite the fact that every line of his body betrayed his fear. "We're here for the lone wolf who entered your territory." Marcus's voice carried on the wind, strong but not quite steady. "She's a fugitive from Silvercrest, unstable and dangerous. We request that you return her to us for proper judgment." Theron didn't move, didn't respond immediately. Just let the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable, oppressive, a reminder of exactly who held the power in this confrontation. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, but it carried like thunder. "No." That single word held more authority than all of Marcus's posturing. "You don't understand," Marcus tried again, and now Arya could hear the desperation creeping into his voice. "She's moonborn. Her power is uncontrolled. She's a threat to every pack in the region. We need to kill her before she becomes powerful enough to remind you that packs aren't the ultimate authority in this world." Theron took a single step forward, and all 6 wolves flinched back. "To eliminate a threat to your hierarchy before she can challenge the system you've built on the graves of her ancestors. I understand perfectly, Alpha Silvercrest. I simply don't care." "This is neutral territory," the Blood Moon Wolf growled, shifting to human. Tall, scarred, radiating the kind of controlled violence that marked him as a warrior. "You have no authority to harbor fugitives from Packlands. This is my territory." Theron's voice dropped lower, taking on a resonance that made the very ground seem to hum in response. "Has been for 300 years. Your packs exist because I allow them to exist, because I choose not to expand my borders and crush every alpha who thinks he's earned the right to call himself king. But make no mistake, the moment any of you cross into my lands uninvited, the moment any of you threaten what I've chosen to protect, I will remind you exactly why your great-great-grandparents learned to fear the mountains." The threat hung in the air, absolute and undeniable. Marcus drew himself up, clearly about to argue further, but one of the Silvercrest wolves, Elena, Arya realized, the one who'd taught her to hunt, put a paw on his arm, a warning, a reminder that pushing this particular wolf was suicide. "The girl is dangerous." Marcus tried one more time, his voice smaller now. "If you're harboring her out of some misplaced sense of, I am harboring her because she is under my protection." Theron's eyes flashed gold, pure and bright. "And anything under my protection is untouchable. You want her? You'll have to go through me to get her. And I promise you, Alpha Silvercrest, you won't survive the attempt." The finality in those words was like a door slamming shut. No negotiation, no compromise. Just a line drawn in blood and power that no pack alpha would be stupid enough to cross. Marcus stood there for a long moment, clearly torn between his need to eliminate the threat Arya represented and his survival instinct telling him to run. Finally, survival won. "This isn't over," he said, trying to salvage some dignity from the retreat. "The Pax will want answers, will want assurances that she's being contained, that she's not a threat. She is a threat." Theron smiled, and it was the most dangerous expression Arya had ever seen. "She's a massive threat to everything your Pax have built, and I'm going to make sure she survives long enough to become everything you fear. Now get off my mountain before I decide that sending your bodies back to your Pax would be a more effective message than words." The wolves ran, not a strategic retreat, not a dignified withdrawal. They ran, tails tucked, scrambling back toward packlands like the hounds of hell were nipping at their heels. Arya watched them go, watched Marcus, the man who'd promised her forever, flee from the mountain without a single look back, without even a moment's hesitation to consider if she was worth fighting for. He'd chosen his people over her, had called it duty. Had made it sound noble, but Kyle was right. There was nothing noble about it. It was just fear dressed up in prettier words. "He did the coward's thing," she whispered, finally acknowledging what she'd known all along. "He threw me away to save himself." "Yes, he did." Kale stepped up beside her, his hand briefly touching her shoulder in silent support. "And now you get to decide what you do with that knowledge. Let it break you, or let it forge you into something stronger." Below, Theron turned away from the border, his posture relaxing slightly now that the immediate threat was gone. He looked up toward the cave where she stood watching, and even from this distance, she felt the weight of his gaze. He'd defended her, had put himself between her and 6 wolves who wanted her dead, had claimed her as under his protection, fully knowing it would make him a target for every pack that feared what she could become. Why? The question circled her mind again. What did he really want from her? As if sensing her thoughts, Kale spoke quietly. "He wants you to survive. That's all. Everything else, what you become, what you choose, who you align with, that's up to you. But first, you have to survive. And that means learning to control the power that's trying to tear you apart from the inside out." "I don't know if I can." The admission came out broken, all the strength she'd been maintaining crumbling under the weight of everything. "I don't know how to be this thing everyone keeps saying I am. I don't know how to be Moonborn when I was raised to be Pack. I don't know how to trust anyone when the person I loved most threw me away like garbage." "Then we start with the basics." Kyle guided her away from the ledge, back toward the deeper caves. "We start with keeping you alive, keeping you fed, keeping you sane while your power stabilizes. Everything else can wait." "Can it?" She let herself be led, too exhausted to resist. "You heard Theron. The Pax know I exist now, know I'm here. How long before they come back with more wolves? More alphas? An army I can't possibly survive?" "Longer than you think. Theron's reputation isn't built on empty threats. Most alphas will think twice before challenging him directly. And the few stupid enough to try?" Kale's smile was cold. "Well, they'll serve as excellent examples for the others." They reached a different chamber. Smaller and warmer than the one she'd woken up in. Someone, probably Kale, had set up a sleeping area with furs and blankets, along with supplies that suggested he'd been preparing for her arrival for some time. "Rest," he said, gesturing to the makeshift bed. "Real rest, not the unconscious collapse of someone dying from rejection sickness. Sleep. Eat when you wake up. Let your body remember what it's like to not be in constant survival mode." "I don't know if I can sleep." But even as she said it, exhaustion was pulling at her, making her limbs heavy and her thoughts sluggish. "Every time I close my eyes, I see them. See the Pack. See Marcus looking at me like I'm a monster. Then see them." Kale settled onto a stone bench nearby, clearly planning to keep watch. See them, remember them, feel all the hurt and anger and betrayal. But then let it go. Let it fuel you instead of consuming you. Because those wolves, they don't get to define you anymore. They don't get to make you feel like you're less than what you are. She sank onto the furs, her body giving up the fight to stay upright. What am I, Kale? Really? Everyone keeps saying Moonborn like it explains everything, but I don't know what that means. I don't know what I'm supposed to become. You're someone who can talk to the moon and have it answer back. His voice was soft now, almost gentle. Someone whose power comes not from pack bonds or alpha dominance, but from something older and wilder and infinitely more dangerous. You're a living connection to the first wolves, the ones who were changed by the moon's light and became something more than animal, more than human. You're proof that the old magic isn't dead, just sleeping. And when you fully wake up, he paused, and something like reverence entered his tone. When you fully wake up, Arya, you're going to be magnificent. Magnificent. The word felt foreign applied to her. She didn't feel magnificent. She felt broken and scared and completely out of her depth. But maybe that was okay. Maybe being broken was the first step toward becoming something new, something stronger. Maybe Marcus rejecting her wasn't the end of her story, but the beginning of a different one entirely. She let her eyes drift closed, felt sleep pulling her under despite her fears. And just before unconsciousness claimed her, she heard Theron's voice from the entrance to the chamber. Is she stable? For now. Kale's response was quiet. The bond removal helped. But she's carrying a lot of trauma, Theron. Years of suppression, months of rejection sickness, and now the knowledge that everything she thought she was has been a lie. That's going to take time to process. We may not have time. A pause, and Arya felt rather than saw Theron move closer. The Blood Moon Alpha wasn't there just to support Silvercrest. He was assessing, deciding if she's worth the risk of challenging me. And he's going to try. Not now. Not directly, but he'll come. With numbers, with strategy, with enough power that even I might struggle to hold them all back if they coordinate properly. Silence, heavy and ominous. Then we train her fast, Kale said finally. Push her harder than we'd normally risk. Get her to the point where she can defend herself. Because we both know there's only so much we can do if they come in force. She's already been through hell, Kale. Pushing her too hard will break her. Maybe, but leaving her weak will definitely kill her. Pick your poison. Another pause, longer this time. Then Theron's voice so quiet she almost missed it. Watch over her tonight. I need to reinforce the borders. Make it clear that today's warning wasn't a bluff. And if they call that bluff, then we remind the Pax why the Moonborn were feared in the first place. Footsteps. Receding, and we hope she's strong enough to survive what that makes her become. The voices faded, leaving Arya alone with her thoughts and the weight of expectations she didn't know how to meet. She was Moonborn, first blood, a living weapon against a system built on her ancestors' graves. She was also Arya Blackwood, cast out, rejected, still bleeding from wounds that had nothing to do with claws and everything to do with betrayal. Both things were true. Both things would shape what she became next. But for now, in this moment, she was simply exhausted. And sleep, when it finally came, was mercifully dreamless. Outside, the mountain stood guard, and somewhere in its shadows, an Alpha King prepared for war. Chapter 4. The Myth Awakens. Arya woke to the smell of snow and ancient stone, and for one disorienting moment she didn't remember where she was. Then it all came rushing back. The rejection, the fall, Theron's protection, Kale's brutal truths. She was in the mountain, under the protection of an Alpha King, learning to become something the world had spent centuries trying to destroy. The chamber was empty. Both Kale and Theron had left her alone, trusting the wards they'd set to keep her safe. She could feel them now, threads of power woven through the cave entrance, invisible but present. Not a cage, more like a shield. Something to keep threats out, not to keep her in. She sat up slowly, testing her body's response. The wound in her side had healed completely, leaving only a faint silver scar that caught the dim light strangely. Her feet, which should have been destroyed from running barefoot through frozen forest, looked almost normal. Even the exhaustion that had plagued her for months felt lighter, more manageable. The broken bond was truly gone, and with it, the constant drain on her energy, the poison eating her alive from the inside. She felt not whole exactly, but less fragmented. Like pieces of herself that had been scattered were slowly finding their way back together. A bundle sat near the sleeping furs. Clothes, she realized. Practical traveling gear in dark leather and thick wool, sized to fit her. Kale's doing, probably. She dressed quickly, grateful to be out of the blood-stained rags she'd been wearing, and found that the clothes fit perfectly, as if he'd known her measurements without asking. Old magic. She was starting to understand that Kale had access to kinds of power that pack wolves had long forgotten existed. She found them in a different chamber, one she hadn't seen before, massive and cathedral-like, with a ceiling so high it disappeared into shadow. The walls were covered in symbols, not carved, but somehow part of the stone itself, glowing faintly with their own light. The language was nothing she recognized, but something in her chest responded to it, a resonance that suggested her wolf understood, even if her human mind didn't. Kale stood at the center of the chamber, studying a particular section of wall with the intensity of someone reading a book. Theron was there too, leaning against a pillar, watching Kyle with an expression that was half exasperation, half fondness. "She's awake," Theron said without turning around. "I can feel her." The casual intimacy of that statement, the fact that he could sense her presence without seeing her, should have been unsettling. Instead, it felt almost comforting, like being seen, really seen for the first time in her life. Good. Kale finally looked away from the wall, his strange eyes finding her in the shadows. "We need to move quickly." "The confrontation yesterday bought us some time, but not much. The packs will be regrouping, planning. We need you functional before they come back." Functional. She stepped into the light, saw both of them assess her with the kind of scrutiny she was getting used to. "You mean trained?" "I mean awakened." Kale gestured to the walls around them. "This chamber is old, older than the packs, older than modern shifter civilization. It's a place of power, specifically designed for Moonborn to connect with their heritage, to remember what they are." Arya moved closer to the nearest wall, studying the glowing symbols. Up close, they seemed to pulse in time with her heartbeat. What do they say? History, prophecy, warnings from wolves who understood what we've forgotten. Kale joined her, his fingers tracing a particularly intricate pattern. The Moonborn weren't just powerful shifters, Arya. They were keepers of the old ways, guardians of the balance between the human world and the wild magic that still exists in the forgotten places. When the packs hunted them down, when they nearly eliminated the bloodline entirely, they didn't just commit genocide. They broke something fundamental, severed a connection that was supposed to be maintained. Connection to what? To the moon itself. Theron spoke from behind them, his voice carrying through the chamber with unnatural clarity. The first wolves were changed by the moon's light, not just physically, but spiritually. They became conduits for lunar magic, able to channel power directly from the source. That's what made them so dangerous to the emerging pack system. They didn't need an alpha's permission to access their full strength, didn't need pack bonds to survive. They were self-sufficient in a way that threatened every hierarchy the packs were trying to build. The implication settled over her like a weight. So they killed them, killed all of them, to maintain control. Not all of them. Kale's hand moved to a different section of wall where a symbol blazed brighter than the others. Some survived, went into hiding, bred with pack wolves and diluted their power enough to pass as normal. Your bloodline is one of those, probably one of the last pure lines left, based on the strength of your power. Pure. The word felt strange. She'd spent her whole life feeling broken, damaged, wrong. And now these wolves were telling her she was pure, untainted by the very system that had raised her. There's something else. Theron moved closer, and she felt that resonance again, his wolf recognizing hers, calling to something deep in her chest. The symbols on these walls aren't just history, they're prophecy, predictions made by the last true moonborn before they were hunted down, and one of them— He stopped, jaw tightening. One of them has been glowing brighter every day for the past month, since before you arrived. Kale turned back to the wall, to a section that did indeed seem to burn brighter than the rest. Child of the flame, he translated, his voice reverent. Born when the old blood wakes, she will walk through fire and emerge crowned in silver. Alphas will kneel or burn. The choice will be hers. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication and impossibility. That's not me. Arya's voice came out too loud in the sacred space. That can't be me. I'm not some prophesied savior. I'm just a pack wolf who got cast out because I was too dangerous to keep around. You're a moonborn whose power has awakened at exactly the moment the prophecy predicted. Kyle's gaze was unrelenting. You literally walked through fire, the silver flames of your awakening, and survived. And every alpha who encounters you will have to make a choice. Submit to what you represent, or try to destroy you before you can challenge their authority. This is insane. She backed away from the wall, from the symbols that seemed to burn brighter in response to her proximity. You're talking about me like I'm some kind of weapon, some tool in a war I never agreed to fight. You became a weapon the moment your power woke up. Theron's voice was gentle but implacable. Whether you wanted it or not, whether you accept it or not, the packs see you as a threat. That makes you part of this war by default. The only question is whether you're going to be a passive victim or an active participant. The choice laid out so starkly made her want to scream or cry or both. She'd never asked for any of this. Never asked to be moonborn. Never asked for power that terrified everyone who encountered it. Never asked to be some prophesied child of flame who'd supposedly change the balance of power in the shifter world. She just wanted to belong, to be loved, to have a pack and a mate and a normal life. But normal wasn't an option anymore. Had never really been an option. She was starting to realize. Her parents had known. The elders had suspected. Even Marcus, on some level, must have sensed that she was different long before her power awakened. They'd all been waiting for the other shoe to drop. Waiting for the moment when pretending she was normal would become impossible. That moment had come. And now she had to decide what to do about it. What happens if I refuse? She met Theron's gaze, refusing to flinch from the intensity there. If I say I don't want this power, don't want this destiny, don't want any part of your war against the packs, then you die. Kyle said it simply, without judgment, slowly, as your uncontrolled power tears you apart from the inside, or quickly, when the packs send enough wolves that even Theron can't hold them all back. But you die either way. The only variable is how much you suffer first. Brutal honesty, no comforting lies, no gentle platitudes about how she could walk away if she really wanted to. Just the truth, sharp and cutting and undeniable. So I don't actually have a choice. The words tasted bitter. You have a choice. Theron moved closer, and she could feel the heat radiating from him, the barely controlled power that marked him as something more than a normal shifter. You can choose to fight, to learn, to become strong enough that the packs can't touch you, or you can choose to give up, to let the rejection and the trauma and the fear break you. Both are choices, both have consequences, but they're yours to make. The weight of that settled over her, the understanding that whatever came next, it would be her decision, her responsibility, her burden to carry. She looked at the glowing symbols on the wall, at the prophecy that claimed she'd emerge crowned in silver while alphas knelt or burned. Looked at Kyle, ancient and patient and utterly certain that she was what he said she was. Looked at Theron, powerful and protective, and somehow afraid of what she might become. And she thought about Marcus, about the way he'd looked at her with fear when her power had awakened, about the choice he'd made, to cast her out, to save himself and his position and his pack. He'd chosen cowardice disguised as duty. What would she choose? "If I do this," she said slowly, "if I agree to training, to awakening fully, to becoming this child of flame the prophecy talks about, what happens to me, to who I am underneath all that power?" "That depends on you." Kale's expression softened slightly. Power doesn't change who you are at your core. It just amplifies what's already there. If you're cruel, power makes you a tyrant. If you're kind, power makes you a protector. The choice of what to become has always been yours. The power just gives you the ability to enforce that choice. And if the power scares me? The admission came out quieter than intended. If I look at what I could become and I'm terrified, then you're smarter than most. Theron's voice was low, intimate in a way that made her chest tight. Fear is healthy. Fear means you understand the responsibility. It's the ones who aren't afraid of their own power who become monsters. If power scared the world out of you once? The thought echoed in her mind, carried on the memory of silver flames and Marcus's fear-filled eyes. Does it still belong to you? "I'm afraid," she admitted, the words feeling like surrender and strength simultaneously. "I'm terrified, but I'm also angry, and I'm done being a victim, done letting other people decide what I am and what I'm worth. So yes, teach me, train me, help me become strong enough that no pack will ever make me feel small again." Something shifted in the chamber, a subtle change in the air pressure, like the space itself was responding to her declaration. The symbols on the wall blazed brighter, and for a moment she could have sworn she heard something. A voice, ancient and female, whispering in a language she didn't know but somehow understood. Finally. Kale smiled, slow and satisfied. "Then we begin, now. Because the kind of training you need can't wait for convenient timing or gentle progressions. You're going to hate me before this is over. You're going to question whether dying might have been easier, but you're also going to survive, and that's what matters. How do we start? We go to the grove." Theron pushed off the pillar, his posture shifting from relaxed to focused. The one place on this mountain where the veil between worlds is thin enough for you to touch the source of your power directly. That sounds dangerous. It is. Kale was already moving toward a tunnel she hadn't noticed before, one that descended deeper into the mountain. It's also necessary. Your power is trying to awaken on its own, fighting against years of suppression and the trauma of rejection. If we don't give it a proper channel, a way to emerge that doesn't destroy you, it's going to keep surging uncontrollably. The grove will help focus it. Give your wolf something to connect to that's bigger than the pain. They descended in silence, following passages that grew narrower and older the deeper they went. The symbols on the walls became more frequent, more complex, until they covered every surface in patterns that hurt to look at directly. And the deeper they went, the more Arya could feel something pulling at her. A presence, a power, something vast and patient and utterly inhuman calling to the wolf in her chest. "The grove isn't exactly in our world," Theron said quietly, his hand steadying her when she stumbled on the uneven ground. "It exists in a place between, a pocket of reality where the old magic pooled and never fully dissipated. Most shifters can't even find it. Their wolves aren't connected to the right frequencies. But you—" He glanced at her, and there was something almost like awe in his expression. "You're going to walk right through, like you were born to it." The tunnel opened abruptly into a cavern, and Arya stopped dead, her breath catching in her throat. It was impossible, had to be impossible. They were deep underground, hundreds of feet below the mountain's surface. There shouldn't be trees, shouldn't be moonlight, shouldn't be a sky overhead showing stars that were arranged in patterns she didn't recognize. But there was. The grove spread before her, ancient trees with silver bark and leaves that glowed faintly in the strange light. A pool at the center, perfectly still, reflecting the impossible moon overhead. And everywhere, on the trees, on the stones, even in the air itself, were the runes, burning bright, pulsing with power, singing in frequencies that resonated in her bones. "Welcome to the heart of the mountain," Kale said softly. "The last true sanctuary for Moonborn left in this world. Touch nothing yet. Just feel it. Let your wolf understand where you are." She took a step forward, and the moment her foot touched the silver grass, every rune in the grove ignited like she'd thrown a switch. Light, everywhere, blazing from every surface, every tree, every stone. And the power, God, the power that flooded through her, was like nothing she'd ever felt. Not the wild, uncontrolled surge of her awakening. This was focused, intentional, ancient magic recognizing her as one of its own and welcoming her home. Her wolf erupted to the surface without warning, not violently but joyously, and for the first time since her power had awakened, Arya didn't fight it. She let the shift take her, let her body flow into the form that felt more right than her human shape ever had. But this wasn't the wolf she'd been before. This wasn't the small, controlled creature she'd learned to be in the pack. This was her true form, massive, easily twice the size of a normal shifter. Her fur wasn't gray or brown or black. It was silver, pure, luminescent silver that seemed to glow with its own light. And her eyes, when she caught her reflection in the pool, burned with the same light as the runes surrounding her. "Magnificent," Kale breathed, and there was reverence in his voice. "Just like the first Moonborn, just like the ones I thought we'd lost forever." She turned to look at Theron, expecting to see satisfaction or pride or even relief. Instead, she saw fear. Not the kind of fear Marcus had shown, not terror at something monstrous and other, but something deeper, more complex. The fear of someone who understood exactly what she was becoming and what it meant for the careful balance he'd maintained for 300 years. He was afraid of her, or more accurately, he was afraid of what she could become. And standing there in her true form, feeling power course through her that could reshape the shifter world if she learned to wield it properly, Arya understood why. She was no longer a victim to be protected, no longer a refugee seeking shelter. She was becoming exactly what the prophecy had predicted, a force that would make alphas choose, kneel or burn. And Theron, for all his power and ancient authority, knew he might one day have to make that choice himself. The realization should have felt like victory, like proof that she'd transcended everything that had tried to break her. Instead, it felt like loss, like the potential for something genuine between them, the resonance their wolves shared, the connection that had formed during the bond breaking, was being overshadowed by the weight of destiny and prophecy. She shifted back to human, the transformation effortless in this place of power, and stood naked and shaking in the silver grass. Someone, Kyle, draped a robe over her shoulders, but she barely noticed. "You're afraid of me," she said, looking at Theron across the grove. "I can feel it." "Why?" He was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Because I've seen what happens when Moonborn come into their full power. I've watched them become drunk on it. Watched them decide that their strength gave them the right to reshape the world according to their vision. I've watched them become the very thing they were fighting against, tyrants who demanded submission or death. And you think I'll become that. I think you have the potential to become that." He moved closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "You've been hurt, Arya, deeply, repeatedly, by the people who should have protected you. And when someone who's been that wounded gets power, real power, the kind that can level cities and break alphas, they often choose revenge over justice, destruction over rebuilding. I've seen it happen. I've had to put down Moonborn who went rabid with power and rage. And He stopped, jaw clenching. "I don't want to have to do that to you." The confession hung between them, raw and honest and terrifying. He wasn't just afraid she'd become powerful. He was afraid he'd have to kill her if she did. "I'm not going to become a monster," she said, but the words felt hollow even to her own ears. How could she promise that? How could she know what she'd become when the power fully awakened? "You can't know that." Kale spoke gently, his hand on her shoulder grounding. "None of us can know what we'll become when we're tested beyond our limits. But what you can do is make the choice, every day, to be better than your worst impulses, to use power for protection instead of domination, to remember what it felt like to be powerless and refuse to inflict that on others." She looked down at her hands, at the silver light still lingering under her skin. These hands could do so much, could heal or harm, could protect or destroy. The choice was hers, had always been hers, really. Even when she'd felt powerless in the pack, she'd had choices, small ones, constrained by hierarchy and rules, but choices nonetheless. Now those choices would have consequences that rippled far beyond just her own life. "I don't want to be what you fear," she said quietly, meeting Theron's gaze. "I don't want revenge or domination, or to make the pack suffer the way they made me suffer. I just want to be free, to be safe, to never feel small again." "Then hold on to that." His voice was rough with emotion she couldn't quite name. "When the power gets overwhelming, when the anger feels like it's going to consume you, remember that feeling. Remember what you really want, because the easiest thing in the world is to let power corrupt your original intent, to tell yourself that domination is just another form of safety, that making others fear you is the same as being free. Is that what happened to the others? The Moonborn you had to kill?" He nodded slowly. They started with good intentions, wanted to protect their families, their communities, wanted to create a better world. But somewhere along the way, they forgot that better doesn't mean perfect, that protection doesn't require absolute control. And by the time I found them, they'd become exactly what they'd sworn to fight against. The warning was clear. This power came with a cost, and that cost might be her own humanity if she wasn't careful. "Teach me control," she said, looking between Kyle and Theron. "Not just power, not just strength. Teach me how to wield this without losing myself, how to be strong without becoming cruel, how to protect without dominating." "That's harder than you think." Kale's expression was serious. Control isn't just about restraint. It's about understanding your own darkness and choosing not to let it rule you. It's about sitting with rage and grief and the desire for revenge until those feelings lose their power over you. It's work that never ends. "Then we start now." She turned back to the pool, to the impossible moon reflected in its surface. Show me how to connect to this power properly, how to channel it without letting it consume me, how to be what the prophecy says I am without losing what makes me myself. Theron and Kyle exchanged a glance, some silent communication that passed between them. Then Theron stepped forward close enough that she could feel the heat of him, the solid presence that her wolf recognized as anchor. "The first lesson," he said quietly, "is understanding that power isn't the goal. Balance is. You don't want to be the most powerful wolf alive. You want to be powerful enough to protect yourself and those you choose to protect, but restrained enough that you don't become the thing you hate. That's the line you have to walk, the edge you have to balance on every single day. And if I fall, if I go too far one way or the other, then we pull you back." His hand found hers, warm and strong and steady. "That's what we're here for, not to control you, not to use you, but to remind you who you chose to be when you're tempted to become something else." The sincerity in his voice, in his touch, made something in her chest ache. He was afraid of her, afraid of what she could become, but he was still willing to help her, still willing to risk himself to give her a chance at becoming something better than the prophecy's weapon. That had to mean something. "I'm going to disappoint you," she said softly. "I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to be angry and vengeful and want to hurt the people who hurt me. I'm not going to be some perfect savior." "Good." Kyle moved to her other side, his presence different from Theron's but no less solid. Perfect saviors are boring, and they usually end up dead because they can't adapt to reality. We need you angry, need you willing to fight. We just need you to channel that anger into something productive instead of destructive. The three of them stood there at the edge of the pool, reflected in water that showed an impossible moon, and Arya felt something shift, not in the grove, but in herself, a settling, an acceptance. She was moonborn, child of the flame, prophesied to change the balance of power in the shifter world. She was also Arya Blackwood, rejected, wounded, carrying trauma that wouldn't heal overnight. Both things could be true. Both things would shape what came next. But the choice of who to become, tyrant or protector, destroyer or guardian, that was hers alone. "Teach me," she said again, and this time it felt like a vow. "Whatever it takes, however long it takes, teach me to be worthy of this power." Kale smiled, fierce and proud. "Then let's begin. Reach out to the pool, touch the water, and whatever you do, don't fight what happens next." She knelt at the water's edge, her hand hovering over the surface. The moon's reflection rippled, as if the water was responding to her proximity. Behind her, she felt Theron's presence, steady and watchful, felt his wolf pressing against her awareness, ready to pull her back if she went too far. And she felt Kyle's ancient power, old and patient, waiting to guide her through whatever came next. She touched the water. The world exploded into light and sensation and power so vast it made her previous awakening feel like a candle compared to the sun. She felt her consciousness expand, touching something infinite and terrible and beautiful beyond words. The moon, not the celestial body, but the entity behind it. The power that had changed the first wolves, the magic that had created the moon-born bloodline. And it knew her, recognized her. Welcomed her home with a fierceness that made her want to weep. "You are mine," it seemed to say. "You always have been." They tried to lock you away, tried to make you forget, tried to kill every wolf who carried my gift. But you survived. And now, child of my light, you will show them what it means to face the moon's chosen. The visions came next, rapid and overwhelming, silver fire spreading across territories, alphas kneeling, some in reverence, others in defeat, crowns burning as old hierarchies crumbled, and at the center of it all, a wolf with fur like starlight and eyes that burned with lunar fire. This was her future, her destiny, her burden. If she was strong enough to carry it, if she was wise enough not to let it corrupt her, if she could walk the line between power and compassion, between strength and cruelty, between justice and revenge. The moon showed her all of it, the potential for glory and the potential for horror, the choice that would define her existence. And then gently, it released her. She came back to herself, gasping, still kneeling at the pool's edge, Theron's hands on her shoulders keeping her from falling forward into the water. "I saw it," she whispered. "I saw what I could become. All the versions of it, the good and the terrible." "And," Kale's voice was carefully neutral, "and I'm more afraid than ever." She looked up at them, tears streaming down her face. "But I'm also more certain. I know what I have to do. I know what I have to become. And I know—" She stopped, swallowed hard. "I know I can't do it alone. You won't have to." Theron's grip tightened on her shoulders, grounding. "That's what we're here for." The training had begun, and in the impossible grove, under an impossible moon, Arya Blackwood took her first real step toward becoming the Child of Flame. Whether that would save the shifter world or destroy it remained to be seen, but at least the choice would be hers to make. Chapter 5, The First Clash. The training in the grove lasted 3 days, though time moved strangely in that space between worlds. 3 days of Kyle teaching her to channel power without being consumed by it. 3 days of Theron showing her how to ground herself when the lunar magic threatened to sweep her away entirely. 3 days of learning that strength wasn't just about how much power you could wield, but how much you could hold back. By the time they emerged from the tunnels back into the mountain proper, Arya felt different. Not complete. She was nowhere near mastering what she was, but more solid, more certain of where she ended and the power began. The mountain felt different too, charged, electric, like a storm was building just beyond the horizon. "They're here," Theron said quietly, his body going tense the moment they stepped into the main chamber. "Earlier than I expected. More of them than I hoped." "Who's here?" But even as Arya asked, she could feel it. The presence of multiple alphas pressing against the mountain's borders. Powerful wolves, each radiating the kind of dominance that came from ruling territories and commanding packs. Everyone. Kale moved to one of the carved windows, looking out over the valley below. Blood Moon, Shadowfang, Iron Peak. Even the Western territories sent representatives. "They've called a gathering." The way he said gathering made it sound like a death sentence. "What kind of gathering?" Arya moved beside him, looked down at what should have been empty wilderness and instead saw wolves, dozens of them, maybe more, camped at the border in a show of force that was impossible to ignore. "A conclave." Theron's voice was flat, controlled in a way that suggested he was fighting to keep his anger in check. "An official assembly of alphas to address a threat to regional stability. It's old law, predating the current pack system. Any alpha can call one if they believe there's a danger that affects multiple territories. And once called, I'm bound by tradition to attend and hear their grievances." "Let me guess." Arya's stomach was already sinking. "I'm the danger they're concerned about." "You're the excuse they're using." Kale's expression was grim. What they really want is to test Theron's resolve, to see if he'll actually go to war over one cast-out wolf, to force him into a position where he has to choose between keeping you and maintaining the fragile peace he's built with the packs. The implications settled over her like ice water. They're going to demand he hand me over. They're going to demand more than that. Theron turned away from the window, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked tired, old. weighed down by centuries of playing politics with wolves who wanted nothing more than to see him fall. They're going to demand I submit to pack authority, acknowledge that the mountains aren't sovereign territory, that I'm subject to conclave law and pack justice, and they're going to use you as the lever to make it happen. So don't go. The solution seemed obvious. You said yourself this is your territory. They have no authority here. Just ignore them. I could. He moved toward her, close enough that she could see the conflict in his eyes. I could seal the borders, refuse to acknowledge the conclave, and dare them to try and force the issue. But that would mean war, not a skirmish, not a border dispute. Full war between the packs and the mountain territories, hundreds dead, maybe thousands, and all because I refuse to play by rules I've been honoring for 300 years. Rules they're exploiting. Arya's hands clenched into fists. They don't care about justice or regional stability. They care about eliminating a threat to their power structure before I become strong enough to be a real problem. I know. His hand came up, cupping her face with a gentleness that seemed at odds with his warrior's body. But knowing their motives doesn't change the political reality. If I refuse to attend, if I break tradition, I give them the justification they need to unite against me. Every pack, every alpha, all of them working together to bring down the last threat to their supremacy. I can fight them, probably even win. But the cost... He stopped, jaw tightening. The cost would be everything I've spent centuries building, every agreement, every treaty, every fragile piece that's kept shifter territories from descending into chaos. She understood what he wasn't saying, understood that he'd fought too hard, sacrificed too much, lost too many wolves he'd cared about to throw it all away on a fight he might not need to have. But that understanding didn't make the hurt any less sharp. So you're going to give them what they want. The words came out flatter than she intended. You're going to choose stability over me. I'm going to attend the conclave. I'm going to hear their grievances, and I'm going to try to find a solution that doesn't end with you dead or me starting a war. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone, the gesture achingly tender. But I need you to understand something. Whatever happens down there, whatever I say or do in front of those alphas, it's politics, it's theater. It's not the truth of what I feel or what I'm willing to do when political solutions run out. And what are you willing to do when they demand you hand me over? When they call me a weapon and insist I need to be destroyed before I become too dangerous? She held his gaze, refusing to let him look away. What then? The silence stretched between them, heavy with everything he wasn't saying. Finally, Kale spoke from behind them. He's going to ask you to leave, voluntarily, to make it look like you're choosing to go rather than being forced out. It gives the alphas what they want. You gone from mountain territory, while technically maintaining Theron's sovereignty. He doesn't submit to their demands. You just decide to leave on your own. The betrayal of it hit her like a physical blow. She stepped back from Theron's touch, saw the way his hand fell to his side, saw the pain in his eyes that he was trying to hide. You want me to run? Her voice shook despite her best efforts to control it. After everything, after the training, after the grove, after telling me I was under your protection, you want me to tuck tail and run so you can maintain your precious political balance. I want you to survive. Theron's control was cracking now, emotion bleeding through. I want you to live long enough to become what you're meant to be, and right now that means getting you away from here before this turns into a bloodbath neither of us can control. Where would I even go? I'm a lone wolf, cast out, with power that every pack in the region wants to see destroyed. How exactly am I supposed to survive out there alone? You won't be alone. Kale moved closer, his expression serious. There are places, old sanctuaries, territories the packs don't know about where wolves like you can hide and train in peace. I can get you to one. keep you safe while you continue to develop your power. And when you're strong enough, when you're truly ready, you can come back and face them from a position of real strength instead of desperation. It was logical, strategic, the smart play. It was also abandonment, dressed up in pretty words about safety and timing. No. The word came out sharp, definitive. I'm not running anymore. I ran from my pack, ran through the storm, ran from everything I knew. I'm done running. This isn't running. Theron's voice was low, urgent. This is surviving. This is being smart enough to know when you're outmatched and need time to regroup. It's still leaving, still letting them win, still proving that I'm exactly what they think I am, a threat that can be managed through intimidation and political pressure. She shook her head, something hardening in her chest. I won't do it. I won't give them the satisfaction. Arya, I'll go to the conclave with you. The decision settled over her, feeling both terrifying and absolutely right. I'll face them. Let them make their accusations. Let them call me a weapon. And then I'll make my own choice about what happens next. Not you, not Kyle, not the assembled alphas who think they have any authority over my life. Me. Theron looked at her like she'd just announced her intention to walk into fire. That's suicide. You're not ready. Your power is still unstable. If they provoke you, if they push the right buttons, you could lose control. And the moment you do, the moment you prove you're as dangerous as they claim, they'll have all the justification they need to put you down. Then I won't lose control. She met his gaze, saw the fear there and refused to let it change her mind. You spent 3 days teaching me to ground myself, to channel power without being consumed. Either that training was worth something, or it wasn't. Either I'm capable of facing them, or I'm not. But hiding away while you negotiate my fate? That's not an option. Not anymore. The determination in her voice must have communicated something, because Theron's expression shifted. Still afraid, still concerned, but also something else. Something that might have been respect. You understand what you're walking into, he said quietly. They're going to try to break you, to provoke you into proving you're unstable. They'll bring up your rejection, your exile, every painful thing they can find to make you lose control. I know. And you're still willing to face them. I'm willing to stand up for myself instead of letting other people decide what I'm worth. Yes. She straightened her shoulders, felt her wolf press close to the surface, controlled, ready, but not dominant. I'm done being a victim, done letting alphas tell me what I am and what I deserve. If they want to call me a weapon, they can say it to my face. Kale made a sound that might have been a laugh or a groan. You're either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. I haven't decided which. Can it be both? In this case? Probably. He moved toward the chamber entrance. I'll prepare the formal response. Let the alphas know that you'll both be attending the conclave. That should give us a few hours while they set up the gathering grounds and finalize who gets to speak. He left, and Arya was alone with Theron in the massive chamber. The silence between them felt different now, charged with things unsaid, decisions made that couldn't be unmade. I can't protect you down there, Theron said finally, his voice rough. Conclave law prohibits interference during formal grievances. You'll be on your own, facing wolves who want you dead, and I'll have to stand there and watch without being able to intervene. I know. You could die. I could die hiding, too. At least this way, I die on my feet instead of on my knees. She moved closer to him, saw the way his body tensed, the war between wanting to pull her close and knowing he should keep his distance. You asked me once what I wanted, remember? In the grove, I said I wanted to be free, to be safe, to never feel small again. I remember. Well, standing in front of those alphas, refusing to let them make me bow, that's freedom. That's refusing to be small. And if it kills me? She shrugged, the gesture feeling braver than she felt. At least I'll die as myself, not as what they wanted to make me. Something broke in Theron's control. He pulled her against him, his arms coming around her with enough force to steal her breath. For a moment they just stood there, her face pressed against his chest, his chin resting on top of her head. "I'm afraid for you," he whispered into her hair. "More afraid than I've been in centuries, because I'm starting to care what happens to you. And caring makes you vulnerable in ways that power never can." She felt the truth of it in the way he held her. This wasn't the calculated protection of a political ally. This was personal, raw, the kind of thing that made smart warriors do stupid things. "Then help me be ready." She pulled back enough to look up at him, not by hiding me away, but by making sure I can handle whatever they throw at me, by trusting that the training you gave me will hold. He searched her face, looking for something. Certainty, maybe. Or the kind of strength that would let him release her to face this danger alone. Whatever he found must have been enough, because he nodded slowly. "Then we prepare. We have a few hours before the conclave convenes. Let's make sure you can walk into that gathering and walk out again alive." The conclave grounds were ancient, a natural amphitheater carved into the mountainside, ringed by standing stones that predated shifter civilization. Neutral ground, supposedly, where alphas could meet without fear of territorial disputes or dominance challenges. Arya stood at the entrance, looking down at the assembled wolves, and felt her heart try to climb out of her throat. There were more than she'd expected. Not just the alphas who'd called the conclave, but representatives from nearly every major pack in the region. 50 wolves at least, maybe more. All of them powerful. All of them radiating the kind of controlled aggression that marked them as warriors and leaders. And every single one of them was looking at her like she was either prey or threat. Hard to tell which. "Remember," Theron murmured beside her, his voice pitched for her ears only. "They can't touch you without violating conclave law. As long as you maintain control, as long as you don't give them cause to claim self-defense, you're protected by the same traditions that forced me to attend." Small comfort when she was about to walk into a room full of wolves who wanted her dead. She descended the stone steps, hyper-aware of every eye tracking her movement. Her wolf was pressed close to the surface, not threatening, but present, ready. She dressed simply. Dark pants, simple shirt, no pack markers or territorial claims. Just herself. Just Arya. The alphas were arranged in a semicircle at the center of the amphitheater. She recognized some of them. Marcus stood near the edge, his expression carefully neutral, but his scent giving away his nervousness. The Blood Moon Alpha, the massive black wolf who'd accompanied Marcus to the border, was there in human form, tall, scarred, radiating casual menace. Others she didn't know, but could identify by territory markers and the way their wolves positioned themselves. At the center, in the position of honor, stood an alpha she'd only heard about in stories. Elder Corrin of the Shadow Fang Pack. Ancient by shifter standards, easily over 150 years old. White-haired and lean, with eyes that had seen empires rise and fall. He was the one who spoke first. Arya Blackwood, formerly of Silvercrest, currently under the protection of Theron, who styles himself Alpha King of the Mountain Territories. His voice carried despite being barely above a conversational tone. "You stand before a conclave of alphas assembled to address a matter of regional security. Do you understand the gravity of your position? I understand that you've gathered here to decide my fate without my input." She kept her voice level, refused to show the fear churning in her gut. "So yes, I understand gravity." A ripple went through the assembled wolves. Surprise, maybe, that she'd dare to speak with anything less than complete deference. Corrin's expression didn't change. "You were cast out of Silvercrest for exhibiting unstable and dangerous power. You fled to mountain territory where you have been granted sanctuary by Theron. In the weeks since your arrival, there have been reports of massive power surges, disturbances in the lunar magic that every shifter within 500 miles could feel. You are, by all accounts, a moonborn, a bloodline we believed extinct, a power structure that threatens the stability every pack in this region depends on. He paused, letting the words sink in. Do you deny any of this? No. Why bother? They already knew the truth. Denying it would just make her look weak. Then you acknowledge that you are a threat. I acknowledge that you see me as a threat. She held Corin's gaze, refused to look away. What I actually am is a wolf who was cast out by her pack for having power I didn't ask for and couldn't control. A wolf who's trying to survive in a world that's made it very clear I'm not welcome anywhere. Yet you survived. The Blood Moon Alpha spoke now, his voice a low rumble. Fell into Theron's territory during a blizzard. Should have died. Instead, you awakened into your true form, became more powerful. And now you stand here, under the protection of the only wolf in this region strong enough to shield you from pack justice. Convenient. Convenient would have been dying in the storm. Arya's hands clenched at her sides. Convenient would have been my power never waking up. Convenient would have been being born into a different bloodline so I could have had a normal life. Nothing about this is convenient. It's survival, pure and simple. Survival that threatens every pack here. Another alpha, one she didn't recognize. Moonborn don't integrate into pack structures. Don't submit to alpha authority. Don't accept the hierarchy that keeps our society from descending into chaos. You're a living challenge to everything we've built. I'm a wolf who wants to be left alone. The frustration was bleeding into her voice now, making it sharp. I don't want to challenge your packs. Don't want to disrupt your hierarchies. I just want to exist without being hunted for something I can't control. Can't control? Yes, that's the problem, isn't it? Marcus finally spoke, and the sound of his voice made something twist in Arya's chest. You can't control your power, can't control your wolf. You're unstable, dangerous, a bomb waiting to go off in the middle of territories where thousands of shifters live peaceful lives. I was unstable because you tried to force a mate bond before I was ready. The words came out before she could stop them, sharp and accusatory. Because you felt my power and panicked. Because you rejected me improperly and left a rotting bond in my chest that was literally killing me. Don't talk to me about control, Marcus. You're the one who lost it first. His face flushed, anger and shame warring in his expression. I protected my pack, made the hard choice to eliminate a threat before it could hurt my people. That's what alphas do. You threw away your mate to save your position. Arya took a step forward, saw the way he flinched back. You felt my power, realized I might become strong enough to challenge you, and you eliminated the threat. Just like you're trying to do now. Except this time, you brought friends to help you do it. Enough. Corin's voice cut through the rising tension. This conclave is not about your personal grievances with your former alpha. This is about the danger you represent to the region, about the choice Theron must make between harboring a weapon and maintaining the peace. She turned to face Corin fully. Saw the calculation in his ancient eyes. This was the crux of it, the real reason for the gathering. You want him to choose. The understanding settled over her, cold and clear. You want to force him into a position where he either hands me over or goes to war. Either way, you win. Either I'm eliminated or Theron's reputation for honoring tradition is destroyed and you have justification to unite the packs against him. We want safety. Corin's voice was implacable. Stability. Assurance that the power you're developing won't be turned against the packs that have maintained order in this region for centuries. And the simplest way to ensure that safety is for you to submit to pack custody, to allow yourself to be contained until we can determine if you can be trusted. Contained. The word tasted like ash. You mean imprisoned. Probably killed once you've decided I'm too dangerous to live. That decision would be made by counsel, according to law, with all proper procedures. Corin spread his hands, the picture of reasonableness. But yes, your freedom would be restricted, for the safety of all. No. The word came out flat, final. I won't submit to pack custody, won't let you lock me away and decide my fate like I'm a thing instead of a person. I have done nothing wrong, committed no crimes, threatened no one, and I won't be punished for being born into a bloodline you fear. Then you leave us no choice. The Blood Moon Alpha stepped forward, his posture aggressive. You're a declared threat. Under Conclave law, that gives us the authority to eliminate you before you can harm Pact territories. She's under my protection. Theron's voice rang out, commanding in a way that made every wolf in the amphitheater pause. Under sanctuary law, you touch her. You violate every tradition you're using to justify this gathering. Sanctuary law applies to wolves seeking temporary shelter. Corin's gaze moved to Theron. Not to permanent residents. Not to wolves who've been training in forbidden magic in your territory. Not to threats you're actively cultivating instead of containing. The law doesn't specify duration. Theron moved to stand beside Arya, his presence a solid wall at her back. And cultivation implies intent to weaponize. I'm teaching her control. There's a difference. Is there? Corin's expression was skeptical. Because from where we stand, it looks like you're building yourself a moonborn weapon, something powerful enough to challenge pack authority, something you could use to expand your territory and break the agreements that have kept peace for 3 centuries. The accusation hung in the air, poisonous and calculated. Arya saw what they were doing, saw the trap closing around both her and Theron. If he defended her too strongly, he looked like he was planning to use her as a weapon. If he didn't defend her enough, he looked weak. And either way, they'd force him into a position where the only winning move was to give her up, unless she made the choice for him. The realization settled over her with absolute clarity. This was her moment, her decision. The point where she could either let other people control her fate or take that control for herself. She looked at Theron, saw the conflict in his eyes. The desire to protect her, warring with the political reality of what that protection might cost. And she made her choice. I'm leaving. The words came out clear, strong, echoing across the amphitheater. Not because you're forcing me, not because I'm afraid, but because I choose to. I won't be used as a weapon against Theron. Won't be the excuse you need to start a war. And I won't stay somewhere I have to be defended like I'm too weak to stand on my own. Theron's head whipped toward her. Arya, you asked me to trust the training. She met his gaze, saw the pain there, and pushed past it. To trust that I could handle whatever came. So trust me now. Trust that I know what I'm doing. If you were him, would you choose peace or truth? She could see the question in his eyes, could see him weighing options, calculating outcomes, trying to find a way to protect her that didn't involve letting her walk away, but there wasn't one. They both knew it. Where will you go? His voice was rough, barely controlled. Does it matter? She turned back to the assembled alphas, saw the satisfaction in some faces, the suspicion in others. I'll leave your precious territories. Find some place where cast-out wolves with inconvenient bloodlines can exist without threatening your carefully maintained order. You get what you want, me gone. Theron gets to maintain his agreements. Everyone wins. Except you. Corin's voice was softer now, almost regretful. A lone wolf won't survive long, especially one with your power attracting attention. Then I guess I'll die. She shrugged, the gesture feeling braver than she felt. But at least I'll die free, not caged, not controlled, not reduced to a political tool in someone else's game. She turned to leave, her heart hammering in her chest, her wolf howling inside her at the wrongness of walking away. Every instinct screamed at her to stay, to fight, to let the silver fire rise and show these alphas exactly what she was becoming. But she'd made a vow, standing there in Theron's chamber, preparing for this confrontation, a vow that she would never beg again, would never plead for acceptance from wolves who'd already decided she wasn't worth keeping. Marcus had chosen his pack over her, had called it duty and made it sound noble. She was choosing herself, choosing freedom over safety, choosing dignity over survival. If that made her a fool, so be it. She'd taken 3 steps toward the amphitheater exit when Theron's voice stopped her. Arya. She paused but didn't turn around. Couldn't. If she looked at him, if she saw whatever expression was on his face, she might break, might change her mind, might do something stupid like stay and watch as he was forced to choose between her and everything he'd built. Be safe, he said quietly, and remember, this isn't over. It's just delayed. She nodded once, not trusting her voice to respond, and continued walking. Behind her, she felt the assembled alphas watching, judging. Some satisfied that the threat was removed, others suspicious that it was this easy. A few, she thought she caught regret from Elder Corrin, perhaps recognizing that they'd just forced out something that might have been valuable if they'd been brave enough to accept it. She didn't care what they thought anymore. She'd spent her whole life caring what packs thought, what alphas wanted, what other wolves expected. And where had it gotten her? Cast out, hunted, used as a political bargaining chip. No more. She was moonborn, child of the flame, prophesied to make alphas kneel or burn. But more than that, she was Arya Blackwood, and she was done letting other people define her worth. The mountain path stretched before her, leading down from the peaks and into territories she didn't know, into a future that was completely uncertain, into a life where she'd have to forge her own path instead of following the one Pax had laid out for her. It should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like the first real breath she'd taken in months. Behind her, the conclave dissolved into arguments about what her departure meant. About whether Theron had manipulated the situation or genuinely let her go. About what they'd do if she came back stronger, more dangerous, truly ready to challenge pack authority. Let them argue. Let them worry. Let them wonder what she'd become when she was no longer operating under their rules and restrictions. She was free, and that freedom, she was beginning to understand, was worth any price. Even the price of walking away from the one place she'd felt safe, from the wolves who'd tried to help her, from the Alpha King whose wolf recognized hers in ways that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. She'd come back, someday, when she was ready, when she was strong enough that no pack could force her into choices that didn't serve her. But for now she walked, alone, unbowed, unbroken, and absolutely, terrifyingly free. Where the story goes from here. The mountain path grew steeper as Arya descended, each step taking her further from the only sanctuary she'd known since her exile. The wind carried voices up from the valley, the alphas still arguing, still dissecting her departure like wolves picking over a carcass. She didn't look back. Looking back was for wolves who regretted their choices. Her wolf stirred restlessly inside her chest, confused by the decision to leave. It didn't understand politics or strategy. It only understood that they'd found pack, found safety, found connection, and now they were walking away from it. "We'll find our own way," Arya whispered to the beast within, "one that doesn't require us to be small." The first stars were appearing when she felt it, a presence following her, not threatening, but there, patient, waiting. She stopped, turned, scanned the darkening forest. Kale emerged from the shadows between two ancient pines, his eyes catching the fading light in shades that shouldn't exist in nature. "You're making a mistake," he said without preamble. "Wouldn't be my first. I came because I've seen this before. Seen young Moonborn walk away thinking they can handle the world alone, and I've buried every single one of them." The words should have scared her. Instead, they just made her more determined. "Then teach me," she said. "You told me there are other sanctuaries, places the packs don't know about. Take me there. Help me become strong enough that I never have to run again." Kale studied her in the dying light. "You understand what you're asking? The kind of training required? It's not 3 days in a sacred grove. It's months, maybe years. Of pushing past every limit, of facing everything you've been running from, the rejection, the trauma, the rage. It will break you." "Good." She held his gaze. "I'm tired of being broken by things I can't control. Let me be broken by choice, by becoming." Something shifted in Kale's expression, recognition of someone who'd finally stopped running from their own power. "There's a place," he said slowly, "far to the north, beyond pack territories, where the old magic still lives and Moonborn can train without fear. But the journey there—" He paused. "Everything that's happened so far, that was just the beginning, Arya. The real story, your story, starts now." She felt it then, the weight of what was coming, the trials ahead, the choices that would define not just who she became, but what the shifter world would become because of her. Behind her on the mountain, Theron stood watching from a distance she could feel in her bones. Their story wasn't finished. The resonance between their wolves promised that much. But first, she had to become someone worth coming back to. Someone who could stand beside an Alpha King as an equal, not a refugee seeking protection. Someone who could make Alphas choose, kneel or burn. The prophecy was just beginning. This is where Arya's true journey begins. Part 2 is coming. And everything you thought you knew about Moonborn, about Alphas, about what it means to be powerful in a world that fears strength, it's all about to change. If you survived rejection and chose yourself anyway, you need to hear what happens next. If you've ever walked away from safety to find your own power, this story is for you. If you believe some wolves are born to kneel and others are born to make them, you belong here. Comment, "I'm ready," if you need part 2. Comment, "Moonborn," if you know this story is yours. And if this resonated, if Arya's choice to walk away rather than beg meant something to you, then someone you know needs to hear this too. Share this, not because I'm asking, but because there's someone in your life who needs to know they're not alone. Someone who's been called too much, too dangerous, too powerful. Someone who's been told to be smaller. They need to find us. They need to know their pack exists. This isn't just a story. It's a mirror. A call, a promise that the wolves who were told they were too much are exactly enough. Part 2 drops soon. Be ready. The child of the flame is just beginning to burn, and when she returns, the shifter world will never be the same.